I'll give you a correction. It's a toilet fire in a one-story ordinary. About 40. Was it 273?
Well, good afternoon. Welcome to FDIC International 2017. We're doing our episode of Tailboard Talk live from FDIC. I'm Craig.
Christine.
And because of the international flair that we're going for, or push that they're going for with FDIC, we thought what a great idea would be to bring an international guest. So we have with us, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, Martin Trainer, and I'm from Ireland, and I worked for the fire brigade there and been in that position from right about 2003.
Okay.
So before we even start, I apologize, lads, because I'm a little bit hoarse.
Might have been on a little late last
It might have been on a little bit late.
It has nothing to do with the long flight.
Oh, thanks for inviting me.
Oh, it's great to have you on the show. One of the best things I think about FDIC is, the most important things really, is the networking. It's meeting people, learning about their organizations and how they function and what they do, how they do those things. It really gives you just that much more perspective on what you're doing yourself. And if you're looking at making changes, it gives you a little depth to that.
Yeah. I mean, there's what you said, about 35,000 people here, and you just run into people from all over the world. And we had dinner with Martin last night, and it was a great time talking to him. And it's fun to hear the differences, I think, between the Irish and U.S. fire services, and just see where they're the same and where they're different. You know, it's a good time. So it's interesting to me. I might be a little weird.
No.
Well, and how much we can learn from each other. So that's what we thought we'd have Martin on and have him kind of talk about where he's from and how they're doing things there. And again, then we learn about the similarities and the differences.
Yeah.
Well, that was interesting. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're from first?
Yeah. Well, the way that I'm from a small rural county in Ireland, and it has approximately about 65,000 people in it, right? Which would be a lot different from maybe the urban centres like Dublin and Cork and Galway, right? But for that 65,000 people, we have 10 stations located around that county, okay? The guys there, for each station, there's 9 firefighters appointed to each station, and they work on what we call a retain system, right? And for you guys in America, the term retain, probably you're not familiar with it, right? But what that means is that we have guys that work in the community. They have a bleeper that they've attached to their belts, and whenever a call comes in, they make their way to the fire brigade, to the station, and they have to do that within approximately less than 5 minutes, right? So they have to work in the community within, say, a 2-mile radius before to make that 5-minute response time. And that can work through, 24 hours and, 365 days a year. But what we tend to do is, for those 9 guys, at least 7 of them normally turn up. So if somebody needs to leave the area to go shopping or go on vacation or anything like that, they agree between themselves, so they always have a core of 7 people in that community at any time to go to attend to a fire.
So it's, in a lot of ways, it's very similar to our volunteer fire service, and there's a lot of similarities from that. But I'm kind of curious when you say county. I mean, in the U.S., some counties are 20 miles across or whatever, and other counties are the entire width of the state of California. So how big is the county you're in?
Well, I suppose the best way to explain it, if we were to drive from one end of the county to the next, and we're not talking anything like the scale that these guys are over here, but we would probably be talking about maybe approximately 2 hours to get from one end of our county to the next end. Okay,
it's a pretty big area.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's that, and the fact that the road network may not be as as advanced as you find over in the States.
Okay. So with a county that size, the 10 stations are situated near the towns in the county.
They are, and there'll be smaller villages, right? We've got obviously within the county of one main town, right? Okay. And then sprawling out from that, then you'll have smaller communities, smaller villages, right? And the tendency over the years has been that, go back many years, and we were having a chat about this last night, and we were having a bite to eat, and but no drinks. That the tendency historically, if there was a serious fatality or something on a larger scale that happened over a number of years, going back maybe 100 years, right? You find that a fire station would pop up in that area, and the community then would get behind it and support it. And that's how it's grown. And I know when we chatted last night, you were surprised that for such a small population of 65,000 that we had 10 stations, but it's grown over the years,
So, I guess, does that, when you have those stations come up based on previous tragedies or whatever, fire fatalities, whatever it is, how does that fit into planning? I mean, do you have some stations that are really close together and other ones that are separated more than you might like? Or
we've only embarked, I suppose, recently over this last, I'd say 5 years. There's been a national authority now which has been set up called the National Director of Fire and Emergency Management, and they've put together a national document which they call a risk-based approach, right? And it's trying to now to put some sort of figures, as a baseline of what we should be achieving, right? So, they might say, depending on a certain criteria, the risks that are in the area, for example, the population, any serious industry that may be there, and that they would put a response time that a brigade should make it within this period of time. And you find that has now become the baseline across the rest of rural Ireland. And from that, yes, it has raised some questions about some stations being too close together, but really it's more than less, taken as a baseline to say that it confirms that what we have is working.
Good.
Yeah.
It's interesting that by chance, in the way it sounds like, it's actually worked out pretty well for you guys, and now that you're starting to pay attention to that a little bit more with this national. Yeah,
with the national director. Yeah, the document is very good from that point of view, because it lets you sit down and across the board nationally in Ireland, we didn't have baseline to say whether we were achieving or not achieving, but this baseline is now giving us something to target for and to be, I suppose, measured against. Do you know what I mean? I mean, the 5-minute response time is, it's crucial for us, because by the time the guys get up, maybe in the middle of the night, get the, gear on them, run out, get into the car, drive out of the station, that's one of what we call key performance indicators that we try to record. And if we find that, there's an anomaly somewhere that it's taking longer, right? Well, then we try and address and see what is the problem. And then we have the other response time from the moment that they had a button on the middle of the station to say that they're, on their way to the incident. Then we monitor how long it takes to get them to the location where the fire is. And if we're working in a boundary of maybe 20 minutes, that's the worst case, But if we start creeping over that, then we need to look at to see, well, what's changed? Has something changed in the community that we need to look at? And it may not be as simple as just building another fire station, because that involves the capital costs, right? Then the cost of the new equipment, and then the cost of the training, and obviously trying to get firefighters that are available to work in those conditions. So we might have to look at that area and say, well, listen, look, rather than response, we might have to go in on prevention, right? And start doing community fire safety talks, simple things like turning up to the primary schools and giving, which we do, across the whole county, is we target kids in around the 9-year-old group, and we deliver a program, if you like, on fire safety. And we find that they work very well because the kids go back home again and they have a wee check sheet to fill out. And if their mother or father doesn't have a smoke alarm in the house, they have to come back again, and they will not tick that box. They're the best fire prevention officers we can ever hope for.
Get the parents.
Oh yeah,
They keep everything up.
yeah. And they won't lie. And they bring that sheet back again to their teacher, and that's their homework. So it works for us in that point of view. So it's prevention, which if we can't make response, we'll look at prevention. But we're fairly, active on protection as well. The fire brigade will get involved a lot when it comes to building control and planning. So we'd be alerted if somebody was building something in the area. Planning would come to us and they would say, listen, look, we've got this in the area. Are there any issues? And depending on the scale of it, we might sit down and say, well, listen, look, do we have the water supply for a start? And if we don't, these guys are going to have to start thinking about putting in holding tanks.
And how do you guys figure out if there's enough water supply? Which formula do you use?
Skip to the next question.
Yeah, very much. We can learn a lot from these guys and not.
Now you were in there. You were talking about standards and performance indicators, and it
Yeah.
sounds an awful lot like to me like accreditation.
Yeah.
Is what we've gone through, and
Yeah.
so I'm just kind of curious, what if you're accredited, or where do your standards come from? Do they come from Ireland or Europe, or
Yeah.
possibly even the ones that we use here? Because
Yeah.
we work through CIPSE, or Center for Public Safety Excellence, which
Yeah.
their fire accreditation branch is the CFAI, Fire Accreditation International.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I suppose if we break it down maybe in two parts, the fire protection side, I know that there's the NFPA codes over here in the States. We don't get involved as much with those codes, but the codes we get involved with would be European norm standards. Okay, so the European standards, and then that would be adapted into our own local codes for Ireland, right? Which we have a document which is called Technical Guidance Document B, for example, and that's one part of a larger set of codes that are used for the building regs. So that part B is to do with fire, and it would give you the standard travel distances. It's prescriptive. It starts off prescriptive, gives you a travel distance, the amount of, if you need sprinkler systems, if you need emergency lighting, the technical alarm system, and then it looks at, different purpose groups, like institutional buildings, like hospitals and nursing homes and stuff. So that's one standard that we work to, and then we would spread out from there using European guidance documents to back that up, right? But that would be what we would call prescriptive. It's there is a 18 meters dead end travel distance, 45 meters for alternative. But then we've got performance designs where we may not be fit to meet those travel distances because the building's much bigger, right? And then we'd have a guy would come in with smoke control design, and look at the time it takes for the smoke layer to descend to within 3 meters, and then show that the available egress time is sufficient, that it's not going to affect. So we have a bit of that on the protection. But on the training side, there's no national standard that we work to. What we find is that, we train up our own instructors. Our instructors get trained by certain areas, but it's not like it's an official as a national training standard, right? So we'd for example, if we get a new recruit, he would immediately go for 3 weeks recruit training, right? Which would involve the standard stuff, rolling the hoses out, the ladders, all the drills, some RTC, road traffic collision training in there as well, and a bit of health and safety stuff, right? That gets them going, but the certificate doesn't come from a national organisation in the country. It'll come from the county that trained them, right? So if it was the neighbouring county that trained them, the certificate would be marked with that neighbouring county, and that's how we work it.
That's, it's very similar to the U.S. in a lot of ways. Our certification system is based on the states, but there's still 50 different states certifying firefighters, and not even all the states are the same. Like in North Dakota, Minnesota, the certification agencies are accredited by pro boards. So in theory, you get a certificate in North Dakota, it should be the same certificate in Minnesota.
Yeah.
But then you can go to some of the other states like California, New York, and they're different systems.
So so it sounds very similar. Yeah, it sounds very similar.
It's funny how the fire services likes to maintain that control, like the local control. So
for their own
a lot of independence is what you tend to see.
Yeah. We found it's like particularly for breathing apparatus training now, if we were instructing our new recruits coming through, I find it valuable, and the rest of the guys also find it valuable because we know their strengths and weaknesses. Hopefully they all pass, and it's great if they do, but some don't, right? But the ones that do pass, we know what they're strong at because we've spent maybe 2 weeks training them, that's what we do for our breathing apparatus. We do a 2-week block for those guys and bring them into all the different various conditions, Okay. But it gives us a good idea. If you were instructing with the 3-week recruit course and then another 2 weeks breathing apparatus course, very quickly you get to know the guy's character and you know what he's good at, what he's strong at, and what his weaknesses are. And then when you're on the ground with him, then you know what you can deploy them to do best.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good way to get to know.
Yeah, yeah.
But I know to some degree, I think it's everywhere in our country. There's a lot more trouble finding people that will volunteer.
Yeah.
Are you running into a similar problem?
Yeah.
There's some departments really having struggle.
Yeah, we really are. We really are.
The bulk of our fire service in the U.S. is volunteer. Your term for that is retained, correct?
Yes, yeah.
What is it similar to what we have here? Is the bulk of it the retained personnel, or
Yes, it is.
different?
It is. The bulk of it is retained, and you're quite right. It's only recently, not recently, but it's been developing over a number of years. We are finding it difficult. We are finding it difficult. I mean, first of all, we'll advertise, and then we get the guys that'll come in. Now they're not flocking in, but we'll get a certain number of guys that'll come in to go for the training. But then the problem we have is you might get them through, maybe 3 weeks of recruits, and they might fail the breathing apparatus, right? Because they're no good in confined spaces, whatever, right? So you have to see them.
Somebody else.
Yes, and the pickings, they're just not there, And the other thing about that is that to maybe get a handle on it, is that some of the rural brigades that we have in the county will have very small numbers of call-outs, right? We had a chat about this last night. I mean, some of the brigades may have 50 call-outs in a year for 12 months. And how do you keep those guys motivated and trained and and ready for action?
Right.
It becomes difficult, But then when you need them,
Yeah.
So that becomes a problem for us.
Well, I think we see the same. I mean, where we live a little bit out of town in a rural area, and the departments that cover the cities, the towns that we live in, are maybe 100 runs. I suppose right now they're 100 runs a year.
Yeah.
And even that, it's still they're going to training every month or every 2 weeks, and there's a lot of obligations that they fulfill, and then there's not a lot of runs. And we like to see the community stay safe, but runs do create better morale. Everybody's doing what they're trying to do.
It brings up about a bigger discussion that I guess I really hadn't thought of as being more of a worldly issue, and think of it as being a problem we see here, because we see it, but volunteerism is down. People are leading busier lives. There are jobs that's harder to get away from their jobs. There's many factors that are pulling people away, but then at the same time, a lot of them see the training requirements. I've got to go to all this training before I can even really get started in this. And that's where they tend to falter out too. I'll do it, and they start and then realize they can't get through it.
Yeah.
And so it's a catch-22 of, well, if you had less training, it'd be easier to get them through, but you do that and they're more likely to get hurt. They're more likely to not know what they're doing, especially when you look at the proficiency issues of, we're only going on so many calls in a year. Now you're trying to keep somebody proficient who didn't have a lot of training to begin with. And we find even with the full-time side, consistent training really is so critical to keep those skills up, because one of the biggest factors is we do so many different things. And even fires can vary so greatly. So unless you're practicing all the time, training, keeping that stuff fresh, boy, it slips away fast.
It does. And we find that, and you've nailed it there. I mean, like those guys in the smaller brigades, they have to do the exact same training, even for the 50 call-outs that they get it per year, as somebody in, like, I don't know, in a city centre like Dublin, right? Okay, it's the same fire, it's the same, the same, training they have to do. And it's difficult for them, as retained firefighters, volunteer firefighters, where they have to, get time off work to go to maybe, 1, 2, 3, maybe 4, maybe 5-day block course, right? And then go back again. So it becomes difficult, for employers and everybody else, on top of the fact that they're not regularly getting to use those skills if they're not getting the call-outs.
That brings up a question. Are the employers in Ireland, the employers in the U.S. have traditionally been pretty good about letting their employees go on call and stuff. Is Ireland support that?
Absolutely. We have no problems with that. They're very supportive. I mean, they can see the bigger picture, because then it's, they're protecting their industry, so they can see that, and they're more than happy to let the guys go.
So are you seeing that because of all these issues in the U.S., you read these articles, you look at fire engineering, and you see these articles, I see them popping up more frequently. They're quite a few departments wrestling with this, going, well, we have to hire some full-time personnel. And it's not an easy thing to do. It's difficult. It costs money. It's a complex issue, but we're starting to see more and more departments in the U.S. at least hire some full-time people. Doesn't mean they're transitioning to all full-time, but at least they've got a core squad there that can handle the paperwork, because there's so much other stuff that goes along with this: the paperwork, the training, the certifications, taking care of the equipment, and all of that. All those things they struggle with. Are you seeing more full-time also, or not?
We're not experienced, not just at the moment, but I understand what you're saying. We have a similar thing. I mean, the record keeping involved in health and safety training has, multiplied over the number of years.
Always something different. Huh?
Yeah, always. And then the refresher courses, like normally what happens is our refreshers are every 3 years. Except when it comes to breathing apparatus or compartment fire behavior, which is every 2 years for the guys. But you're right. We're just not at that stage yet where we've started to, employ full-time guys.
Okay. That's I didn't even realize it, but when you were talking, you said you're doing breathing apparatus and compartment fire recertification every 2 years.
Yeah.
And then there's other recertification every 3rd year.
Yeah.
So just because a volunteer goes through the training, or the retained firefighter goes through the training,
yeah,
they're not really done, because they need to continue.
Yeah. I mean, the recruits course is 3 weeks. The breathing apparatus is another 2 weeks, right? And once they complete that, they're allowed to go on the run, right? But they have other courses, EMT, and certain other courses that they have to do as they go along, and they'll get those, right? But that's the minimum to get them on the run and get them going. But then after that, they're 2 years later, after doing their initial WIRES course, they have to go back and do a 3-day refresher course, and that's the way it works then, to keep them up to speed. And when the lads come down to the training, they welcome it, because they haven't had to use their cylinder, their set in anger, so it's a great opportunity for them to refresh their own skills.
That's how long do you put them in to figure out how to put those helmets on?
So how about then your officers? Are there educational, certification, or licensure requirements for them?
No, there's not. What tend to happen, and we had a chat about this even last night as well. Any of the officers that would be in place, that would be reviewing drawings and plans and building control and stuff like that, there, even inspecting buildings or whatever, they would come in at after university at an engineer level, right? And they would have the skills then to assess that, drawings and stuff.
Do those employees or firefighters, or whatever their title is, I'm not sure, do they also respond on calls, or are they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So typically, what happens is, if we had 10 brigades in our county, there's 4 of us that are full time in the office or in the building station, and every week we would take the call, right? So if there was an incident, and I don't know, maybe something more than the normal, right? Okay, like a chimney fire, we wouldn't have to respond to, right? But if there's something more than that, we would jump in a car and drive to that location and assist, in the sense that we'd take over as incident commander and start, using the incident command system then.
So when you get let's say you have a room and contents fire in the house, so just a single family dwelling, you're going to have the incident commander responding, which is one of your full-time employees, and then how many engines? If you have 9 people at the station, 7 of them you said are usually around. 7, yeah.
Normally, we have predetermined attendance, is what we call it, right? And for a house fire, it would be 2, right? So we take 2 brigades, from the county that are, the next available brigade in the closest proximity to that fire, and we'd call them in, and that's what happens. So we'd have 2 that would turn up to a house fire. For something like a chimney fire, just 1 brigade would turn out. RTCs, 2 brigades, so it depends what way we've determined what our predetermined actions are going to be, based on the standard call-outs that you get.
Okay. So a house fire, you're going to end up with like 14 people there between the two brigades then? Okay.
Yeah. And if it's persons reported, I don't know what the terminology you might use here, but if there's somebody still inside the building, search and rescue, that's when you need those, you need the extra guys there,
Well, for sure.
Yeah.
14 even. That's pretty close to what we have when we show up on scene, and amazing how fast we run out of people, even,
It's unbelievable, especially if you're looking for a water course.
Yeah.
You know, in a rural area, that can be difficult.
Yeah. As we were talking to a guy that we used to teach for, a friend of ours, that was telling us, we got talking about rural, rural water supply just the other night, and they were at a fire in a town, and it was right downtown, and it was a small town, and it was a 50,000 gallon water tank that this town has. They ran it dry in about an hour, he said. So then they had to start bringing in water shuttle, using water tenders. And do you remember how many 27 departments was it?
It was a lot. I think he said it was a 50,000 gallon water tower, and they must have been flowing about 1,000 gallons an hour, because he said about 5 hours into it. He said, because he wasn't the initial incident commander, he said that he had gotten there later into it, and then they passed the incident command to him, or at least operations.
Yeah.
And he said he didn't have the radio in his hand more than just a few minutes.
Yeah.
And the main pump operator called and said that the supply hose was flat.
Yeah.
He said he
was
looked up.
his mic like, oh, wait. But yeah, they set up, along the lines of what you're talking about. He set up a water shuttle flowing over 1,000 gallons a minute. They ran it for several hours after that. It never lost water again. But it took, I think he said 27 departments, 27 water tenders or tankers.
No way to ferry the water.
Just ferrying the water,
Yeah, got that. Yeah, well, we would, in a lot of cases, I suppose, we're fortunate that there would be a lot of local rivers and stuff in the area, in Ireland.
Well, it doesn't rain in Ireland, does it?
No, there's enough time there. But we can be unlucky. You can be unlucky that you're in the middle of nowhere and you don't have that, nearby. But what we have is we'd have a tender that would ferry the water to us, and we'd set up like a reservoir or a dam or whatever you call it, and just pump out of that and pump from it, So that's how, it's not ideal, but that's what we try to do.
But that just takes more people.
It takes more people, That's the problem,
So it's amazing the similarities actually between the U.S. and the Irish fire service. It's you think you go across the Atlantic, they got to be doing something different.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's very similar, I think.
And on the protection side, do you, just to find out a little bit how you do things, do the fire brigade get involved in the protection side when you're looking at, new buildings being constructed in the area? Do you have a say in what gets put in?
Like our department's divided, so we have the fire prevention division and we have the fire suppression division. The fire prevention division is the one that reviews the plans and they go to the training so they can read the plans and do the sprinkler flows and all that stuff. Suppression doesn't get involved until the buildings are going up, and then they try to get into the buildings to see how they're being built so that if there's a fire there, they understand how it's going to behave. And then they also, once the buildings are up, our our crews go out and do inspections every year. So every commercial building in our town, every residential building is inspected on a regular schedule. So they do get involved with that, but they don't look at the plans. No.
Right. Okay. But the prevention side does look at, and is there a strong link between the prevention and the response guys?
I think so. Everybody that's in prevention has come from suppression, so they have that background before they go into prevention.
Right.
And so they understand what's important to us, and they do a good job. I think they do a really good job. And if they see something, like I had one that, in fact, Craig's brother came in the other day, and a building got approved. The main street is 45th Street, and this building was set back. There's actually a road between 45th Street and this building, but this building still has a 45th Street address. So, they make us, so Doug said, hey, if you get this into this address, you're going to have to, it's behind a building, behind another road, even though it has this address. So they're very good about letting us know what's important.
Yeah, that's brilliant. But you mentioned something we do as well. We call it pre-fire planning, where we go out and visit the buildings like that. Now, we used to do it that we brought the whole crew out, right? But we found that didn't work for us because, there was a lot of talking going on and you couldn't pick up on all the information when someone was giving you a tour around it, right? So it was very difficult. So we broke it down and we decided that we'd go out with the station officer and the substation officer, and they would go out and, like, if there was a complicated building, they would give me a call and I'd go out with them as well. And we'd speak to the maintenance manager, or whatever you want to call it, the guy that's over the whole building, right? And he would show us, this is where the hydrants are, this is your dry riser, the sprinkler system's over here, the alarm systems are, and then we start asking. It's funny when you go out to those buildings, And you might say, well, why is that like that? You know, and because they've been living and working in that building for so long, they don't see the hazards.
Yeah.
You know, and
You like the firefighter that doesn't have the smoke detector up? They took it down, put a battery in, and forgot.
Yeah.
I've done that. My kids were like, Dad.
I know, but it can happen so easy.
Yeah.
No, we don't go out to find fault. We just go out to maybe make a recommendation and say, well, this is a pre-fire plan. We want to get familiar with the building, but maybe you should fix this, and maybe you should do that. Make some suggestions that'll help us when we turn up. But we find that that's probably one of the most valuable pieces of work that we do, because then what happens is the lads, the two guys come back again, and we might do up a very small PowerPoint presentation, right? And what they'll do is they maybe do 10 slides of maybe the 10 most critical issues that, you know, the hydrants are here, the alarm system is located behind a cupboard in the reception, you know, these things, you know, and the key to the room is located under the table. You know, there's these sort of things that when you turn up, that you're going to be panicking looking for. Right?
Yeah.
So that we do that and pick out the most important things, and then bring them up and show them those 10 things. Right? Okay. So I think we're getting more out of it than if we just go up and we wander around, because we're not really bringing any intelligence back. You know, really worthwhile stuff. You know?
Right.
So that seems to work for us now this last while.
That's good. Yeah, that's a good way, because our crews are going out. So with the 3 shifts, one engine might go to the same building 2 or 3 times to do the inspection over the course of a few years.
Yeah.
And the other 2 crews on the same engine might not get there because of the way the inspections fall. So they might not see that building for a long time. So to do that, then everybody's seeing the same thing.
Yeah, and we find with keeping it's only a couple of slides, about 10 slides, you know, we can add to it if we go up maybe in a year's time or 2 years' time and then change something, you know. But it's always refreshing. You know, you don't have to carry it all around your head, you know. And we also try to do another thing as well, that when we turn up, they always want to give us a bunch of keys, right? Okay, and they always want to give us, I don't know, like 50 drones, right? And I keep saying, look, if we take all of that, we're going to need another plans to carry the stuff there.
Yeah, we have to have a plan to find the plan.
Yeah, exactly. So we're trying to get away from that. So what we try to do then is advise them to set something up, like, you know, either in the reception area or maybe on the wall just outside at reception area, where they can update their contact list, you know, as they need to update it.
Right.
And that's in there, and the key, maybe the keys, master key for whatever rooms are there, and the drawings of the building are there as well, because that there might be extensions or stuff that are being updated that if we hold the old drawings all the time, we might not be aware of, you know.
Right.
So they're working with us on that, and again, I think it helps us because we know when we turn up, the information's there, and it should be live information, should be up to date, you know.
So that must be, I mean, like when you first started describing that, we use lock boxes. So
Yeah.
the homeowner, or not the homeowner, but the business owner will put it on the wall, but they're, you know, they're not that big. So you must be talking about something that's bigger if there's plans and everything.
Well, depend, like for example, a nursing home, right? Maybe a 50-bed nursing home over maybe 2 levels, right? Might maybe 3 drones, 4 drones, you know, but they'll be A1 size. I don't know the probably size of the table, you know.
Right.
And then you have the contact list, because that changes all the time as well. You know, the janitor, and who's the head nurse, and you know, who's the owner of the premises, who's the electrician, who services the alarm. You know, that is a screw that keeps changing all the time. So there would be a fair bit of information, but the box doesn't have to be anything big. I mean, we've even sort of said, like, the box that you have for putting the fire extinguishers in. We've sometimes recommended those, put those on the wall. And just put the stuff in there. You know, it's nothing serious. You know, it's just something we know where to get it. You know?
Handy.
Yeah.
So we rely on computers. We're relying on technology to get us a lot of information. We've taken the plans, prevention, kids plans, kids drawings, and then they Andy is one of our office assistants. She'll enter the drawing into the computer, and so then when we get dispatched to an address, we can open up a drawing of the floor plan and where the keys are and stuff. So
that's brilliant.
As long as it works.
Yeah, but that is brilliant.
You're relying on technology,
No, that's absolutely brilliant, because we're starting to. It'll probably take about another 2 years for us to get to that stage. But the drawings are, when somebody's planning for planning or building control approval, right? There's a new national building control system where they have to lodge it online, right? So that is going to be made available then to us to tap into also. So that would be great, but that's probably about 2 years away before we get to that stage, you know.
It's great though to have a central point like that where we
Yeah.
submit.
Yeah, it's building a tool management system. It's great.
The
time flew by.
It's already
done already?
We're out of time already, yeah.
Martin didn't make you make it.
No, I don't think my throat was.
Mikey G's here waiting.
Yeah.
We gotta get these guys on. So, yeah, we thank you so much, Martin, for visiting with us. We learned a lot, as always. So, there we go. Get Mikey G on the video.
Don't mind me. Love you, boys.
Yeah, thanks, Martin.
Yeah,
that was
it's been
great.
great. Thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me on. Thank you very much.
Well,
You from Seattle?
that's your thing.
Yeah, right there. Are they seeing us yet? We can't see you. That's the, yeah. I'm excited about this, guys.
Yeah, good tip.
I'm excited about this. This is good lineup. I feel like I'm a tourist on Mount Rushmore. Is Lincoln? Well, hey, everybody. I wish you were at FDIC like I'm at FDIC. Welcome to the Mikey G and Mikey D show. We didn't have enough couch space for Dugan, so it was too much human being to fit on these couches. So you're just going to have to deal with me a little bit today. Michael's doing the right thing. He's over at the stair climb right now, representing for fire engineering and for, firefighters who care everywhere. He and Chief Halton are at the very top of the stair climb, And when every firefighter gets to the top of that, they get greeted by Bobby and they get greeted by Mike with a handshake and a rock on and good job. So otherwise he would be here. Since I don't have him here, and since I am at the greatest show on earth, the most amazing fire training spectacle that you could ever want to come to, I decided instead of jabbering myself, because I don't think anybody wants to hear what I have to say, I went out and got 4 of the finest men I know, 4 of the most gifted and articulate and competent fire training instructors in the nation, and actually in the world. I got an international show, so in the world. And I'm going to let them talk for about 10 minutes, and then we'll laugh and we'll joke and we'll say, you know, different stuff. But I want you to hear from these guys the stuff that they're working on, and let it be an incentive to you, not only to subscribe to fire engineering, which I assume if you have a brain you already are, but make some plans to come to FDIC, because that's the place where you get this entire collection of amazing instructors, and you get to do what I'm doing right now. You get to be a tourist. I'm just a tourist. I'm just a wide-eyed dude now, sitting here talking with some of the coolest cats in the planet and some of the finest minds under God's green earth, if being skilled at the calling of firefighting is what you're interested in. So if that's what you want, tune in for the next hour or so, and you're going to hear some amazing stuff. We're going to talk about the projects they're working on, the books that they've written, the articles that they're doing, and hopefully they'll share with us a little bit about the classes that they did at FDIC and, you know, some of the high points of those. So if you aren't at FDIC, you get to cheat a little bit. You get to get in on some of the stuff. We're going to give you a little bit as a taster so that next year you come hang out with us and you get the full show. So real quick, I'm going to do a once around here. I'm going to let them introduce themselves and just you know, where they're from. I mean, some of the accents, I think you're going to figure it out pretty quickly. But let them introduce where they're from, what class they taught at FDIC this year, what's the project they're working on. Once we get around and we talk to everybody, then I'm going to individually talk to them and let them kind of expand on it. So, brothers, like you said, I'm the tourist at Mount Rushmore, and I got these big these four heads right here on Mount Rushmore. Now, judging by the size of the heads, that's a lot of mountain. So you know, go ahead, buddy. Tell them who you are.
Okay, my name is Shan Rafael. I'm a station officer with the Queensland Fire and Emergency Services. I've been a career firefighter for 34 years, and I've always been interested in fire behaviour. I think one of the gaps that was apparent in my education, not just my education, I think it's always been really global actually, is understanding fire behaviour. We go out there, we do drills, we practice different things, we drag hose around, and we tend to just do actions, don't we, rather than really understanding fire behaviour and how it works. So that's almost something I wanted to learn more about, and there wasn't much in the curriculum that was available to me back in that day. So, and there are a couple of pivotal events that changed the course of my life, and one of them was South Point Honda. Absolutely, in February 1994, and we lost two of our probably our best firefighters, very, very good men, in very tragic circumstances. And the fire itself, it wasn't a massive building. It wasn't a building that you'd sort of say, this is an extremely risky building. It wasn't complex. It was actually quite small. It's a Honda dealership. And so I think we all followed that one pretty closely. We wanted to know what happened to these guys, because nobody really knew what happened. And we thought, well, the coroner's got the resources. He can dig deep. He can get through information. He can get anything he wants, basically, in the coroner. So we followed that for some time, and the union put forward some ideas on what actually happened there. But I felt it was really incomplete. And I think at one stage the coroner talks about some phenomenon of fire that beset these guys, dislocated from the hose line. I'm thinking, well, that's not good enough. You know, how sad is that? Some phenomenon of fire. They couldn't pinpoint it, they couldn't name it, they couldn't explain it. But they said that was instrumental in dislocating these guys from the hose line, caused burns of such severity it would render them unconscious. And I felt really actually quite deflated, because here we are, and we didn't have anybody in Australia, or like where they looked at internationally, they could sort of say, hey, this is what the phenomenon was. It was triggered by this. It could have been prevented by that, or whatever the case may be. So that was the beginning of my quest in '94. You know, I actually put a proposal forward. I made some contact with some great people over in the UK and Sweden, established those links, and I thought, well, we've got to do something about this. I can't sit on my hands. I was just a substation officer back then. And so I told a couple of guys what I was doing, and they sort of laughed at me and said, you get luck on that one. It seemed like a substation overseas. But And there was Rockhampton, 1996.
Oh, yeah.
Rockhampton Backpackers, and two of our guys had a very, very close call. Same thing, the official report came out, and I talked about some phenomenon of fire. Actually, Casey Van Montenbroek actually came closer to the actual problem than anybody else did, and talked about the techniques that are available overseas.
Yep.
So I thought, I can't keep talking about this proposal. I've got to stop talking and finish the damn thing, because it would have gone on for years.
Sure.
So that was the catalyst to finish it off. I put that together, and it was good timing. We had a new commissioner at the time, and so I was sent to Sweden. So I studied in Sweden with the Swedish methodologies, looked at the UK, how they'd implemented it.
Hung out with Stefan a little bit.
Well, actually, that was, you came a little bit later on.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah, so
You rode in your jet stream.
that's it. Treat me on.
Tristan is telling the story.
You know the nice thing? I can't wait till I'm in the same room with Stefan, because it's gonna be,
Oh, he's a great
well,
guy.
Stefan, you're a good guy, but you ain't no Chandra. Well, I appreciate you being here with us. I'm gonna let you talk about the book and classes a little bit. Ben, I had the privilege of listening to Ben do the keynote at the Honeywell Scholarship Dinner. And Honeywell did just a tremendous job in giving all these scholarships to firefighters who had proved themselves across the country, and got to sit in on the dinner and got to listen to your presentation. It was an amazing discussion of his story, the ups and the downs and the hurdles that he's overcome. So, introduce yourself to the audience.
Thanks, Mike. Ben Walker from the UK. Started off in time where Metropolitan Fire Department is in the very northeast of England in the UK, where they are taught like this. Geordie's man, I'm going to drink Newcastle Prune Ale. So I've had a few ups and downs, in my personal life that Mike's alluded to, and I rode the wave and ended up as live fire instructor training London's firefighters in the third largest municipal fire department in the world. And what really interested me was, with the fire behaviour, was picking it up at a second stage after the pioneering work done by Sean. It would be churlish not to mention from the UK Paul Grimwood and his pivotal work. Sure. And obviously John Madonna and also Ed Hartin over in Washington State.
Ed Hartin out from Phil and I's neck of the woods.
Yeah, just over the water there. But I was interested in sort of standardizing and trying to break down sort of complex content. During some of my outreach work, where I've taught down in South America and in the back and beyond in various places, many firefighters haven't had the benefit of formal education and science lessons at school. So how could I make them safer when we've got no resources and no access to textbooks and no real sort of previous knowledge of that subject or of scientific concepts? So thought about it, went away, how can we overcome this challenge, and worked out a system of breaking the concepts down into really easy to understand chunks, using everyday items to try and build those neural pathways so people can recall them at 3 a.m. while on the fire call. Think about the crazy guy with the paper towel tube, with the Coke can, diluting the gases down and making that learning accessible. And that led on to my first book, Fire Dynamics for Firefighters, which is a non-sciencey science book. Hopefully we're trying to get a reciprocal deal from the UK publisher with Penwell. Discussions are ongoing, so I can't say too much about that at the moment. But things are...
You're amongst friends. We won't tell anybody. We won't tell anybody.
So Mark, if you're watching this as well, the speed of Mike.
Mark is a good buddy of mine. Before this radio show, he gave me permission. So go ahead.
Well, even so, the royalties from the books on my side support an organisation called the International Fire Rescue Association, which enables that outreach work to be done. Supplying and training and teaching, people in the lesser fortunate parts of the world that are still trying to protect the communities. So I'm interested in that, and also it's evolved on again to standardising instructor training. I've been pivotal in the UK in the new instructor criteria and developing our new national live fire training policy. And my next mission, as I immigrate to the States to join the rest of my family who are up in Rhode Island, is to try and coordinate and work with great guys like yourself, and so we're all talking off the same page. At the minute, we've got guys doing fantastic work. We named some. We've got the guys doing like Kill the Flash over, Joe and Andy Stars, or the Max Firebots guy, PJ and Sean are doing some interesting work. The ISFSI, programs, and if we can coordinate and all move in the same flow path, coin the phrase, moving forward, I think the US could lead the world within 5 years. It's viable.
Sounds good to me. Yeah. Thank you, Ben.
Awesome.
Thanks for everybody. Yeah, we'll talk about it a little more. By the way, could you just say London one more time? London. That's awesome. Gives me goosebumps. Philly, tell me what's going on, man.
I'm a station officer. I've got 24 years on the job.
Phil Path, by the way, you forgot his last name. So Phil Path, yeah. All right.
I'm a rescue guy. I don't know what that means to you truckies, but also I also operate in urban search and rescue as well. I haven't got enough spare time. I'm also president of a charitable organisation that looks after firefighters in time of need.
What's the name of that?
Queensland Firefighters Charity. So amazing. Firefighters come on hard times. We give them a hand up. So it's about rescuing those who rescue others. So and just because I'm a rescue guy, I thought I'd write a couple of articles in relation to nothing to do with rescue.
Like sense.
Hey, I didn't say the rescue guys were smart. So one of the articles I'm looking at the moment is cross-laminated timber construction being used in the high-rise realm. In Australia, we've got a number of structures that are completed and under construction as we speak. They'll present some challenges to fire agencies around the world. They're starting to make an impact into North America now. Obviously with code, there's a lot of low-level stuff being erected, especially in that your Motel 6 type size construction. But as opposed to your toothpick tower type construction, that is, we've all seen the effects of that with Rail in the last few months. These guys, they're heavy timber construction, but it's all laminated timber. So the challenges are going to present. We need to investigate that and maybe have a conversation about it. Another issue that I've taken note of and written about is composite cladding. So we've probably all seen those high-rise building fires externally, especially in the United Arab Emirates. We've had our own fires down under. So I've written on the quality, the way they're clad onto the building and attached. There's a whole dynamic related to that. So one source led into the other, and we're just got another couple of articles I'll be coming forward shortly.
You have 3 articles in the hopper right now, right?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So
pretty cool.
Yeah.
No wonder I can't get anything approved. Look at this guy.
It was
That composite cladding, man. When you watch that stuff go, I mean, it's well, the one I saw, it looked like there was a wildland fire running up the side of the building. Yeah, that's what it looked like. Yeah. Out of control, stay out of its way, because there's not a darn thing you can do.
And look,
crazy.
Some of the application principles is as simple as it's taped to the side of the building.
Yeah. It's all principles, isn't it? In the 21st century, with all their knowledge of fire engineering, how does this ever happen in developed countries?
And everybody on the panel says in unison, money.
It could be a simple case of materials. The evolution of product development, materials development is just outstripping what code can interpret. So it's worth having a conversation about that.
Cool. Well, we'll talk about it a little more. So awesome. And then everybody knows who this guy is. My brother from Seattle, a co-author of Air Management for the Fire Service, and one of the Seattle guys, Phil Jones.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. I'm not sure there's 2 Phils over here. Phil, and if you're watching or listening on radio, I'm not sure you'll be able to tell which one's which. But I got to reiterate what something that Mike said about being here. It's such a joy to be able to spend time with people who really have passion for the fire service, and to be able to talk with a group like this is amazing. Yeah, so I work for the Seattle Fire Department. I'm an operations deputy chief, which means I'm a shift commander.
So there's 208 folks on duty, and I'm doing everything I can to make sure that they have what they need to provide great service to the citizens. A lot of that for me is focused around making sure that the limited amount of training time, Mike will tell you, we have a lot of busy houses. And that number just keeps going up as we add density to the city. It's a city I love, city I live in. And so when we're spending our time training, I want to make sure that we're getting the maximum value for that hour, hour and a half, whatever it is. So work on some things that help make that happen. I work on the post-incident analysis committee. I'm a committee chair there to make sure that we're picking the right events to look at, and we're looking at them in a professional way. Work on the SOG committee to make sure that the SOGs that we write as a result of our actions reflect what is actually happening on the street, and give people just enough guidance without being too prescriptive. And I think that's a tough balance, and I hope we're hitting it right. And then I help to write company officer curriculum for company officer meetings, and also to train the chiefs who are running those meetings, and help train them, provide feedback to them. And we're really moving towards, in those meetings, trying to have a very facilitated approach rather than the chief officer spending most of their time in a lecture type environment, but trying to create an environment where, as the instructor, they're providing the subject matter, the thing that we're going to talk about today. But largely, say I threw a personnel problem on the table for company officers. You have 8 to 10 company officers in the room. There's a lot of expertise there about what's working now. I mean, I was a company officer a decade ago, right? And we've hired almost 200 people in the last couple of years, right? So their expertise, I believe, in something like that exceeds my expertise. So if we can get and that's what I teach. One of the things I taught here at FDIC is to turn that methodology around so that you're guiding the discussion, but you're not the primary subject matter expert. You're not the person who's doing all the talking. So what our message is when we give it to our own folks is, in those types of environments, that's not every training environment, but it's a powerful teaching and learning environment when company officers or people who are dealing with tactics or whatever it is speak to and listen to each other, as opposed to one person's opinion of what's going on. So we give them the guys we like them to talk less than 30% of the time. If I have my druthers, I'd have them talking less than 10% of the time. And so I try to give some guidance in my class about how to structure questions, how to structure follow-up questions, what is the nature of open and closed questioning, how to deal with the person who isn't engaging, how to draw them in, all those sorts of things that make it so that when you're putting on a class or a training session where there's a lot of expertise in the room, that you can gain the value of all that knowledge that's in there, and they can hear their peers or other people and get their perspective on things. So there's a lot of value in that.
Awesome. And what's the name of the class? So I'll tell you, I get to see some of the evals and work on the board and just try to decide what classes we're going to do. One of the best reviewed classes of last year was Phil's class, and where substantive comments were made about this helped me, this opened my eyes. One of the best reviewed classes. And the title was
Instructional Craftsmanship Beyond the Lecture Method.
Yeah. So, man, hope you check that out. I mean, it truly was. It was no surprise to me. I mean, we got to work next to Phil and be dazzled by him quite a bit. So, no surprise to me at all. Well, okay. So, how much time do we have, Scott? What are we looking at? 25. Okay. Here's what I'd love. I would love to hear in about a 5-minute block. I'd love to hear if they could only get a couple things from you, the things that you think are the most important about your message, that if you get this, it's a good start or an entree into what you do. I'd like to hear what that is. So, right. Chandler, you are on the clock.
No pressure.
Look, let's bother you. I'm just going to do a countdown.
Not at all. Yeah, I think that our topic was reading smoke or read fire. Right. So we'll look at the fire behaviour indicator, smoke, air, heat, flame. But before I did that, I went back and looked at fire development, fire behaviour and components. And I think that one of the really important points that I hope people took away from my lesson was that we've got a third event. And I think we understand flashover all around the world. We
Mostly.
Mostly, yeah, there is some, if you don't like a definition, there's 6 or 7 others, just pick your own and make your own one up. But, basically we sort of agree about flashover. We agree pretty much on backdraft and some slight definitions. But these are events that both occur in the room of origin or just outside the room of origin. And I think that what I'm really passionate about teaching people is that just be careful. Both of those phenomena have very clear indicators, almost shouting at you. But the problem is that we have events where that smoke has left the compartment on fire, it's travelled down the corridor. As it moves down the corridor, it premixes. So it starts up here as maybe a really thick, black, hot smoke. And I think it's in our DNA, we go, oh, that's really dangerous. By the time it gets down at the end of the corridor and accumulates in a void or a space somewhere, we walk through it and it's no longer hot. It's no longer not very thick. And we think, that's not dangerous. In some of these environments, you can be standing up in a pair of shorts and a singlet and be comfortable.
That's his house. That's his house.
If I'd have known, I would have had a uniform requirement. We would have been in shorts and a singlet.
There's many case studies where guys have been caught in this phenomenon, and they've been in an environment that said, prior to the event, there was no excessive heat, the smoke was light in colour, it wasn't very thick. And so what I'm trying to make of people aware is that event, and it's controversial what you call it, and people get really upset about, I don't like that name, I don't like this name, I don't want that name.
It's the important stuff that matters.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not that you're going to, it's not that you're going to die if you get caught with these things.
That's well, what do we call it? Get the name right, that's really important. But we called it fire gas ignition many years ago, and the reason we chose that term is that that pre-mixing that goes on can have a massive impact on how the fire develops. So if we pre-mix a fuel with air, we can get 10 times the burning velocity. And there are many of these case studies show that these events were actually explosive, literally blowing roofs up and blowing walls down. So it's a very variable event. It can be almost like a flashover, almost like a backdraft, or it can be like an explosion. But the key message is just be aware, guys, that I'm always looking for hidden smoke. Did it get up through the wall? Is it sitting up in the ceiling space? Is it sitting somewhere else? And just because it's not hot, it's not black and it's not thick, be very, very careful, treat it with respect. And there's many case studies that have ended very badly in those environments.
Are you more fearful of smoke in the broader compartment like that, or are voids of more concern? Where's the volatility the most?
Yeah, I think the voids are the ones you don't see. Sure. But also we need to be aware of the smoke in the compartment. In the classic scenario, if you've got a structure fire, you need to get in to actually get to the seat of the fire. It's all the way up the back. So we've got all the back of the structure, we've got a room blazing away well. But when we're going through that corridor, we've all done it. You walk down the corridor, and it's not really hot, and you're not worried, you're relaxed with it. And the message is that don't be relaxed. If you see smoke, I don't care what colour it is, what density it is, the potential is that there is unburnt fuel in there. Sure. It may have premixed, and if it has premixed, it's going to be explosive. Deal with light coloured and cold smoke. So, there's different techniques. We use a pulsing technique with a combination nozzle. There's also some great work being done with a straight stream bounced off the ceiling. You can close the room off, you can get rid of the smoke. There's a whole range of ways of dealing with the smoke. What I'm saying to guys is do not walk through that smoke layer thinking that you're safe because it's not superheated. So that's probably the biggest message I got. The other one is white smoke. I think that we tend to think black, hot smoke, that's really dangerous. Something in our DNA, I think, but when we see the white smoke, we get relaxed. And something that we've noticed is if you pyrolyze something, doesn't matter whether it's plastic or it's wood, it gives off white smoke. And I think that when you think about it, that is the whole calorific value of that substance has been released. So the full energy is in that block of wood that's been pyrolyzed. Whereas if you burn something, some of that energy is being converted to heat and light energy. So really, your potential energy load in white smoke is significantly more than black smoke. Now, what goes in our favour is it's cold. It's got to be heated up, so it's a little bit less easy to ignite. But if you do ignite it, it's a very powerful event. It's fuel laden.
Is cold smoke the term that you use? Is that the term of the day? Or?
Well, not really. We just talk about smoke in general, but we do say that just because it's not hot, it's cold smoke or cooler smoke, doesn't mean it's not dangerous.
Well, I know in some of the fires I've been in plenty of smoke that wasn't hot, but it wasn't hot because I was in bunking gear.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's the thing.
Well, if you're not in bunking, if it's just, if I got no hood on and all that type of stuff,
Yeah.
it probably would have been plenty harder than I thought it was, right?
So basically the message is that there's smoke in there, treat it with respect, regardless of colour, thickness, density, and don't think that because you're not feeling that radiant heat coming down and it's not black and thick that it's not dangerous. It can be equally dangerous. So,
Okay.
And you have some of those gases in there that, the aerosols especially, like the ignition temperatures are in the 400s.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you're down around the 4 foot level and it's 400, 450, 500 at the ceiling, you're not feeling that heat, especially with the mud gear stuff.
And those too light.
But somewhere within that gas layer are aerosols that are at their ignition temperature, right? And then once they light off, and this is something you get from, the ladder fuel things from that Dave Dodds has talked about, they add enough energy to get the next one going, and the next one going, and the next one going.
Chain reaction.
So I love your thought there that hot, cool doesn't mean safe.
No, it doesn't. We've got one of the French guys built a little prop with actually polarized little chips of wood.
Yeah.
And it's just pyrolysis products. They put it into a little, like a fish tank, so want a better term. And you can see the temperature, they've got thermocouples there, and they can ignite that very, very powerfully.
Yeah.
Depending on what stage of the mixture's at. So great little demo about, cold white smoke and its danger.
Well, you take that in hand with like some of the classes that I've taken this week is Glenn Corbett. You get the modern like structural construction of these big buildings. There's always like 750 feet long. So there's ample time for that smoke to mix and propagate and cool off.
The kill zone, as Bobby Holton calls it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a
Well,
concept.
you don't control all the variables.
Yeah.
We talk about this in the UL all the time when we're talking about things. You can only prescript things or prescribe them so much because you don't know what other openings are going to happen. Failures in the building, other people open doors, and all of a sudden the mix changes just a little, and it's a rough day for the good guys. Cool, awesome. Ben, you can do one of two things. You can talk more about what you're doing on the fire side, or if you want to share a little bit about lessons learned getting back to where you are as motivation, you can do that. It's up to you.
Well, I think the motivation stuff, Mike, is at this stage of the week's best over a bit.
Okay, all right, gotcha.
On the fire side, the
We
man,
didn't provide us any beers. Scott's kind of a cheapskate, so.
the man from down under has stolen my thunder. So again, on a very similar theme, we're very much on the same page with the way that we train, and we're trying to sort of complement and support each other and move forward. However, what I tend to do as well is hit things at that stage. So explain why. Why is this happening? How does pyrolysis happen? And so on and so forth. But tactically, Chan mentioned the kill zone. As I progress on through our training sequences, we do talk about flow path and the kill zone. My initial department in time and wear in Newcastle, we pioneered PPV use in the UK, and it was being tested and used back in 96, 98, and we made a lot of mistakes with it, not really realizing that we were, because we had the benefit of a lot of brick construction, a lot of small row houses, very, very simple layouts, and we were managing the flow path without actually probably realizing what we were doing. And PPA, but what I tend to discuss when defining flow path is, obviously we've got a unidirectional and bidirectional. If we have a unidirectional flow path, we've got the inlet side, basically air going into the fire. We've got the outlet side, which is the fire and the combustion products going to the exhaust vent. Now the second side is arguably the most dangerous place you can be in a fire. It's like being potentially caught in a blowtorch, getting on the wrong side of that flow path. And we had some discussions with Bobby prior to the workshops we delivered last year. And we tossed a few things about and said, well, really, that's the kill zone or the fatal funnel. So
It wasn't that was Susie said that term. That's the best description for it.
And so interior crews or your engine companies or even the guys who the ladder crews doing the search, it's so crucial to convey the dangers of being in that area, because it only takes one trigger. Brother, you're cooking in there. And unfortunately in the UK we've lost certainly 2 incidents where we have double line of duty deaths And the parallels, shockingly, 5 years apart, were exactly the same. So we need to really start learning and, applying that concept. Taking it on as well. I mean, the third fire phenomenon, the fire gas ignition and versus backdraft, I tend to just say, what's the trigger? Obviously, fire gas ignition is normally remote, it's voids, it can be adjacent rooms. But the trigger there is the ignition source. Backdraft, the heat, the ignition source is already in the room. It triggers the air emission. I mean, one of the things we move on to in our new book, and again, I'm being a shameless self-publicist.
Shame away. That's awesome.
Shame away. It's not really prescriptive because, we can't, I mean, I don't work in Seattle, I don't work in Queensland, don't work for the FDNY or anything like that. So I don't know the ground, but there's certain stages of development on the fuel control curve, on the vent control curve that lend themselves to certain water tactics, certain air tactics. And one of the things we've done in our new book, and it's not really innovative, we've just put a few things together, is line up things that work. So ventilation control situation, you're outside, you're doing the size up, reading the fire, doing the BSOF, right? We've got a vent control profile here. The signs of the pressure, the volumes, the temperatures, they're showing us that we've got plenty of heat in there. We've got loads of pyrolysis products. That lends itself to an anti-ventilation strategy on the air. But we've still got to get rid of those gases. So if we're going to cool the gases, reducing the volume, reducing the temperature, reducing the volume of the gases, using our science laws to assist us, perhaps that lends itself to different techniques. If the size of the compartments are small, potentially fogging works there, the mist, the gas cooling. So we just line it up in the fuel control curve. If something's flash over, fully developed, we need heavy flow at that stage. And, provided we're not actually above, if we're venting at that stage and nobody's within the risk area, let's open up and let's hit it, whether you call it a blitz attack, a transitional or whatever, and just get some heavy flow. I mean, big fire, big hose, medium fire, medium hose, small fire, small hose. So, it's interesting. I think it's, people will potentially enjoy it, but it's not a panacea. It's not a remedy for all else.
It's key principles, isn't it? Those are the key principles. And how you apply them depends on your context.
One of the things that you described was you had two incidences of recent, they're 5 years apart, but similar things. I know from when Phil and Stephen Casey and I were looking at out of air types of things, some of the most visceral out of air situations that ended in line of duty deaths, those got pressed. But if there was 2 or 3 that were actual line of duty deaths, there was 100 that were close.
Yeah,
so those didn't
misses.
Yeah, those didn't make the paper because nobody died, but it was only just from proximity. They just happened to be a door over or something like that.
I was talking to, again, without sounding like a name dropper, I was talking to Alan Brucini. I was talking to Bruno. Yeah,
at least if you drop a name, you drop the name.
Yeah. Well, the weird limey guy was talking to Magnum PI's dad. That's what somebody said. It's
Well, you know how he described it? He described it, the old fat Italian guy was talking to this English rock star. That's what he described it. So
it's too kind. But he talked about changing habits rather than changing culture. And one of the things I've noticed, and it's very apparent in the UK, and you guys can film in Australia and the US, was that there's an embarrassment factor. I mean, we've all made mistakes. I'll hold my hand up. You could grab the Encyclopedia Britannica of my various problems. However, people have got to start fronting up, and it's got to be a supportive environment. And let's change that habit. Not think, I've got away with that, but I'm not going to say anything because these guys are going to either roast me or I'm going to get in trouble. The chief's going to kick me all over the room, and it's changing the habit rather than a culture.
Man, awesome. Phil, I want to say? Well, I'd love to hear, you got 3 articles coming out. I would love to hear just one, a little encouragement for the guy or the gal who's out there who's just like you, who has got an idea and they're not sure, they don't feel like they're this super gifted, mega talented instructor, that only the mystical few get to do this type of stuff. Talk to them a bit, because you got 3 articles approved.
Absolutely, and without a doubt, it's just, if you have an idea, chase it, because there's a good chance that whatever you're thinking about, someone else is thinking about it also. And this environment here, especially the fire engineering family, the FDIC show itself, is without doubt the premier place to share information and knowledge. So if you have an idea, absolutely put it on paper, submit an article, talk about it, because it's just mind blowing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This paper's always the hardest, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And you're really
taking that
putting yourself
first
out
step.
there, aren't you?
First step, and
He was tired of me mocking him over and over again. Get your article written, get your article written, get your article written.
and the captain said, he said, you should read some of my early stuff.
Or my latest
Yeah,
stuff.
it's done in crayon. So
Well, no, but you know, I mean, if you write that article, you can always bounce it off your colleagues, can't you? And so, look, rip it up, give me, tell me your words. And so I know it's very intimidating, that first paper, but you're going to get out there and share your thoughts. And okay, so what if you make a mistake the first time round? You know, it's not the end of the world.
What's the key things that you're writing about right now or teaching about? If you had a couple things that you really want the firefighters who are watching to know, what's a couple things from that?
First and foremost is the heavy timber construction. We're going to see more of it. We're not even really aware that it's out there. It's here now. It's in North America, it's in Canada, it's Australia, it's in Europe. Knowing how to, like especially for North American guys in engine and truck operations, is that your walls just is more than just a skin with a stud frame behind it. So making entry, ventilating, and putting that fire out inside that box is going to be a challenge. There's a lot of testing being done at the moment to see how these structures perform under fire conditions. They've been undertaken back in my home.
There's some unknowns, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's new. There's unknowns of how it's going to act.
Well, at the end of the day, it's still tiny pieces of timber all glued together.
Right.
So,
They should look at the elements, don't they, rather than, there's a tendency to look at each element individually.
that's right, not the sum of its parts.
The assembly.
Absolutely, absolutely. Outside of that, though, all I can say is, if you can get to this event, get here if you can. Forego that cup of coffee every second day or something. Get those pennies together, because the information sharing and the ideas that you get here, it is phenomenal. It is absolutely phenomenal. Doesn't matter where you're from or where you are in your career, whether you're a candidate, freshly minted, or you're a seasoned professional fire officer, there was always something to take home. Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah, and one other thing, so everybody's watching here, so he's used to me harping on him about getting stuff done. He finally just wrote, so I would stop nagging him, but the nagging's not done. Phil had some incredible experiences in New Zealand with the tragedies that happened there, so much so that he won the Queen's Medal for it, which is really the highest honor that you can get.
Say that on the radio.
Well, it's said now, so now you owe cake and ice cream to the entire troops there, or whatever it is.
I'm in good company.
Vegemite
I'm in
and
good
toast.
company.
I don't know what you give out when you do something, in your place, but involved in some absolutely incredible rescues, and I'm trying to get him to do just lessons learned and key tips learned on the ground when it's an absolute horror show, and there's tragedy, and you got to make decisions on who's going to live and who's not, right? So
absolutely, it's a triage, and it's done on the back. It's done on the back of a napkin in your mind.
Right.
So situational awareness, understanding the environment, is absolutely critical, and without a doubt, the training that you do beforehand prepares you for that. So crucial. Absolutely.
Cool. Phil, a lot of us don't know how to teach. We think we know how to teach. Give them some tips.
Well, one of the primary things I think is recognizing that your responsibility as an instructor is to craft things in a way that your student can understand them, right? And I think for me, a little bit of a disconnect is going on, not just in the fire service, but I think sort of generationally right now. Like I said, we're hiring people as fast as we can get them through drill school. And we're still not making up any ground for the people who are retiring, right? So two things we need to do. One is to be able to extract the knowledge of those people that are leaving and get that into the people who are coming in, which is, is a big challenge. But the other is that the way that I learned, the way that I taught, the way that I interacted with those who came before me worked for me. But I don't know that that if I did it in that way, it would work for the next generation. A great example, when I was a training chief, we had the captain, the recruits were doing bailouts, and one of the recruits says, hey, instead of going all the way to the ground, if I was on a 6-story building, could I just swing into a window that's down below? And the captain, who's, he's 40-something, right? He says, oh yeah, you could definitely just die-hard it. And, of course, I'm watching this whole exchange go down. I instantly picture the movie in my mind, know exactly what he's talking about, the whole thing. And the new firefighter looks at him and goes, sir? He goes, just like Die Hard.
Yippee-ki-yay.
Yeah. Sir, I don't understand. I mean, literally a complete and total lack of understanding by the recruit. Now, that's not the recruit's fault, right? He probably knows about a lot of movies that I have no idea about, right? He could use a ton of institutional references for music and games and all sorts of things that I have no understanding.
Oh, so we all know you've got Frozen on
Frozen.
DVD.
Yeah, well,
let it go.
If Mike promises me a Rush concert, I'll go anywhere in the world. So, but the goal there then is to understand that when you're the fire instructor, when it's your job to design curriculum, to figure out how that gets done, it's not okay to just say, well, they don't get it, so somehow there's a moral failing on their part. It's not because they have a lack of willingness to serve their community. It's because they don't know what a choke is. And we can explain that to them. We can teach them that. But if I don't internalize the failure of them to learn to be my responsibility instead of theirs, then there's no way we bridge the gap. And so part of that is just being willing to look at yourself as an instructor and say, how am I conducting myself in the classroom? How do I, when I ask a question, am I willing to let them answer it, even if the answer is wrong, without jumping on them, embarrassing them, turning them off to fire service education, possibly for the rest of their career, right? And trying to figure out a way to get the fire service instructors to just apply themselves to the craft and recognize that teaching is a craft. And there are people that's their full-time gig. And then there's a bunch of people like me and these gentlemen here who have a passion and develop a need to teach in order to get their passion across. But that's not my primary gig. So if I can have a second thing that I'm trying to be good at, I still have a primary thing, right? I have a department to help run. I have people to train. I have skills I need to get across. So as I'm learning things about how to be a teacher, where I'm still just a novice, really, even though I've been doing it my whole life. I mean, my mom had a kindergarten in my basement when I grew up. I started teaching swimming when I was 14 years old, right? I've been around teaching a long time. I still can see that I know so little about that craft. And as much as I can learn about that craft, and as much as I can, in a classroom environment, try to communicate some of that information to my students so that they might be better instructors, that's what I'm trying to get done.
When you talked about the class that you're doing at FDIC, you made a comment about you would love to get the person who's trying to teach the class to speak about 10% of the time. What's the nugget in there for instructors as far as get out of the way and get the knowledge from the class? How would you describe that to them to encourage us to do that? Because it's hard. When you're an instructor and you get going, you got all this content in your head. You want to bam, bam, bam. But okay, we got through that. I got 12 other things I want you to know. Where's the value lie in there?
Well, Mike, I heard you talking to somebody about your class and how you tried a new technique where you had people get to know the people around them. And it's a little bit more difficult at an environment like this where you might have 150, 200, 300 people in your class. But you say, hey, I would show a video and I'd say, normally you would have had one person talk about their ventilation strategy.
Raise a hand and say, yeah, go.
And so what I heard you say was now you have 4 or 5 people in close proximity to each other and say, hey, you talk to each other for a couple of minutes about ventilation. And so what that does is it lets them hear multiple perspectives, followed on by a little bit of the leads. Yeah. And quite frankly, if I took a personnel problem and I was going to talk about it, right, or a tactics problem and I was going to talk about it, I could probably in my planning stage say, here are the 5 most important things. That's true. Now I have my course objectives, but I can probably just go into the class and give them the problem or show them the tactics and say, what do you think are the 5 most important things? And we're going to have the same 5 things. But instead of me saying, this is what's important, the students have said, this is what's important. And they know some things about every one of those, right? So if I have 10 students and I get 2 or 3 nuggets from those 10 about each of those items, my guess is those are my bullet points in support of, right? And so by just understanding how you can structure your own interaction, and not that you don't have things to offer, because you do. You are, many cases, you are the subject matter expert, but there's a way to get them engaged, and it demonstrates for them that they have value, they have knowledge, and not only that, but their peers, their compatriots also have a lot to offer. I think that in the long run, that builds things like my willingness to call you about a situation. Say, hey, we had this fire, here's what I saw, what do you think? Or I have this person on my crew who's demonstrating these behaviors, right? So because they've heard you offer some expertise before, and you're their peer, you're likely to seek them out. So, there's a, I mean, obviously I can just keep going, right? But,
well, that's why we want people to come see the class. We're getting all the teasers out. Go ahead and finish.
No, obviously that's a passion of mine is to be able to do that, and then just the opportunity to like I'm working with Dave now on the reading smoke stuff, to do some of the air management stuff that we've done. All those things I think just give us the ability to have these sort of interactions.
And real quick, I'm not going to let you let that one slip by. Tell them real quick about working with Dave and what's going on there, because it's one of the coolest things I've heard in a while, and such an obvious melding of talent and message.
Well, Mike, you remember, we first taught with Dave, I think it was 2006 or 2007 here at FDIC.
Long time ago, yeah.
And just had a great time. And since then, have built a real brotherhood with Dave. And so as he decides that he's not going to spend as many days teaching, or frankly, he has so much demand, he's asked me if I'd be willing to take on his curriculum and not only send the message that he has, but be able to add my own knowledge and style and stuff to it. And I said, well, that's an opportunity I can't pass up. And so to the extent to which Dave can't or isn't available to teach, or it decides that he'd rather spend some time sitting on his deck drinking wine in Denver, I'm hoping to take up some of that slack.
Yeah, I can't wait to see the innovation that's going to come out of that pairing. Absolutely incredible. Reminds me of when Bittendorf and Dodson got together for building construction. Put those two minds together. Good grief. So I can't wait to see it. Can't wait to see what's happening. We have our next host is in. Just a little 30 seconds. Speak directly to the people that are out there that are thinking about coming to FDIC, and just tell them to come. Tell them, remind them again what your passion is, and tell them to come, and I'll have each of you do that.
Look, there's nowhere else you can go and have this sort of variety. I mean, it's just incredible. And if you can't find a type of something that suits you, then you're probably in the wrong profession.
Yeah.
You're absolutely spoiled for choice. The hardest thing about FDIC is, which class will I do? Because you look at any time slot, there's probably 4 or 5 that you'd really like to do.
Absolutely.
And you've got to narrow it down to one. So that's being spoiled for choice. And where else can you get that? FDIC.
It's the greatest show on earth in this industry, and the opportunities there to meet with the best of the best. This is the deltas of the fire service, or the SAS, where I'm coming from, and it's number one. You've got everything. You make great friends, you make great contacts, and sometimes you even see my comedy routines as well.
On the back of what Shan said, if you come, bring your friends, because if you get spoiled for choice, get your friends to go and do a separate class to what you're doing. So when you get back together, you compare notes, and that information sharing is just exponential from there on in.
Absolutely.
So, oh yeah, it's like, what can I say?
Well, all of these guys, they got a little bit of travel time involved to get here, right? So there's obviously some commitment on that coming.
Well, when you're here, do not in any way, shape, or form think that if you see one of us or any of the other instructors walk down the hallway, please ask us, stop, say, hey, can I ask you this question? Hey, I have this idea. I'll tell you, I cannot, the number of classes I went to was great, and I learned a lot in those classes, but having a conversation at breakfast or while I'm getting a cup of coffee, talking to somebody, the ability to just find out what's going on in your chosen profession, or what you're dedicating your life to as a volunteer outside of your normal work, a service that you're providing to your community. It's a energy infusion from the time you leave your hotel room in the morning until when you get back 3 hours later than you planned on, because you were in the lobby, you started a conversation, you sit down on the couch, and the next thing you know, the bellhop's going, hey, we need to clean this place and you need to get out of here. It's just amazing.
Well, on behalf of my brother, my partner in crime, Michael Dugan, who's right now probably panting down the stairs to get down from the stair climb, I want to thank you, fellas. You are the names and faces and indicative of just how incredible this fire conference is. And listening to you speak, I get this sense fire service is going to be just fine. We got the brightest and the best people on the God's green earth that are working on the problems, working on the things, trying to meet the challenges, trying to meet the changes. And I'm honored to know you, and I hope you were blessed by this. And just real quick, how do they get a hold of you if they want to talk to you? What's the best way to contact you, Shan?
3dfirefighting.com.
3dfirefighting.com. Okay.
We've got a Facebook page, Fire Dynamics for Firefighters book, and my own personal website, benwalkerfirefighter.com.
Okay. Ben Walker, International Man of Mystery.com.
So traditional email, philpath1l@tpg.com.au.
All right.
And then for me, you can go to my website. My goal is to set your mind on fire. So my website is ignitionpointtraining.com.
All right. God bless you, everybody. On behalf of Michael Dugan, I'm Mike Galliano, Mikey G and the Mikey D Show. Have a great time. Come to FDIC, and we will see you down the road.
Absolute pleasure.
Good to go. Hey, everybody. Danny Sheridan. I'm here at FDIC live at the center, and today is Friday, I believe. Wrapping up a nice week. Had a good class yesterday. You know, it was pretty well attended. I feel really blessed. It went really well. I normally, you know, when I do my class, it's first Due Battalion Chief. And what I try to do, you know, in FDIC is that I don't think that people want to hear me recite something out of a book. My mindset, my thinking, I want to share my knowledge. I want to give you my experience, and I want to bring you inside of my thought process. So what I did yesterday, normally I could do 6 topics in my lectures. I give it for a full day or a week, whatever. But I decided to load up on the size up, okay? Because I think, you know, size up is so important for battalion chiefs. You know, you know, information is just crucial. You know, and it was nice to be out here, and you know, I run into, like, it's every year now. You know, it's like seeing old friends. You know, going back to a high school reunion every year. And seeing people from the old neighborhood, because I run into the instructor's room, and I don't see these guys now for a whole year. And, you know, once in a while we might bump into each other if we live close or work close. But more often than not, I don't see most of these guys, and it's really nice to, you know, learn from these guys as well. I actually I took one of the classes on Wednesday. My class was Thursday, and Gene Slogowski, he's a fireman in 27 truck, does a presentation on Black Sunday. Black Sunday happened in 2005, and 27 truck was involved. They lost 2 members, Kurt Myron and John Blue. John Blue was a chauffeur, and Kurt Myron was the officer that was working that day. And I never really heard the full story on what happened on Black Sunday. And I took Gene's class, his lecture, and I listened, and I actually learned. I just sitting there, I learned something. I have 31 years in a fire department, and I learned a tremendous amount of stuff. And it made me think about my own class, like size up. And I took some stuff out of that class, and I actually applied it to my own class. So, you know, the beauty of this FDIC is that, you know, you come to this one-stop shop. You come to a place where, you know, you could fill many bills. You could come out on the floor, and if you want to catch the latest equipment, you know, I work also in the FDNY. I also do a little bit in R&D, looking at new products, you know, that have to do with maybe thermal imaging cameras, air packs, and whatever. And, you know, so you could get that. You could take a class. You know, you could, you know, you get to talk to some of the authors. You could get some books, you know, whatever it is. So it's like this one-stop shopping. So, you know, sitting in on Gene's class was actually humbling, because, you know, he's a fireman, I'm battalion chief, and I'm supposed to know everything, right? But, you know, you never stop learning. It's just amazing how much I pick up when I come out here. And I listened to him talking about what had happened on Black Sunday, and I was like, wow, like, what would I have done if I was the commander that day, if I was the IC? You know, and I put myself in that position, and I sat there listening to the tapes, which I have a hard time listening to, because I knew Kurt. Kurt was, at the time I was a captain, he was lieutenant. He was working in the same place I was working at. We were both kind of covering in this one firehouse. He was doing the overtime tour in 27 truck. So, you know, we had worked together, so I knew him. And, you know, listening to the voices, I had worked in all those companies. And I actually became the captain of 46 Engine, which is in the same house with 27 truck. And I got there kind of on the aftermath of Black Sunday and having to deal with that wreckage. And one of the firefighters who had survived and had a really, really tough time. And I became almost like a big brother to him. So, you know, but where else do you get that? I mean, you come here, and we all work in the FDNY, yet I came here and had that experience.
I think that, you know, it's just, I never, you know, I myself, coming out to FDIC, I myself even get very intimidated because there is just thousands of, from firefighter to chiefs, and it's just overwhelming. And the amount of knowledge that's out here, I mean, it's just, where else can you find that? I mean, just in one place, the amount of knowledge that's in these walls right now. So I feel, you know, I feel very honored to be part of this. I'm always amazed that I get invited back, and I enjoy it. You know, my wife can never really figure out, you know, what my motivation is, and you know, I don't think she really understands. You know, she doesn't really understand how we are. You know, this is a big part of our lives. You know, when you're a firefighter, it becomes part of your essence, really. So having the ability yesterday to share my knowledge, you know, is an honor, really. I don't say that, you know, just as trying to be, you know, politically correct. I really feel honored when I come here, and we do it because we love what we do. And you know, so myself, my motivation when I do a class is that I want guys to try to get into my mind and try to explain to them, like, what the thought process is when I'm in command. And I thought it went pretty well yesterday. I got a lot of good feedback. You know, the compliments I get is that, you know, I use real events. I had recently been involved in a bunch of fires and a lot of lessons learned, you know, and it's great to just be able to share that knowledge with guys, and who knows what effect that would have. You know, I had a room, maybe 200 people in a room, and they go back to their respective departments, and maybe something I said jars something in their memory, and then they do something that may save somebody's life. You know, you don't know how far-reaching this whole conference is. So, you know, that being said, you know, it's like kind of that ripple effect. The FDIC is, you know, like, this is the center, and guys come here from all over the world now. And what they get here, you know, I could go take a class on hazmat, I could take a class on water supply, ladders, maydays, you know, you name it. Whatever you want to, whatever you're into, whatever, you know, your specialty is, and you want to learn more about it, you can get it here. There's no doubt. You know, you might almost, it's almost to the point, I heard the guy saying earlier, the guys that were speaking, that, you know, there's almost too many choices. You know, like, you have to come back the next year and you could do a whole different program. And, you know, it's just so important in this fire service that, you know, nothing that we do is proprietary. And that's how I feel. I've done a lot of work in South America, and I feel that, you know, like, I was maybe given a gift that I worked in where I worked, and I learned what I learned. And I thought it was always a responsibility on me to share what I know with everybody else. Like, you know, it would just be a crime if I were to have some information and feel like this is proprietary and like no one else should know it, because I'm the opposite. If I get something good going on, I'm going to write an article about it. I have an article coming out in May in the magazine, and, you know, that was just a result of a fire that went very well, and really I had minimal to do with it. It was really, I had great people working under me. I made a good decision or two at the right time, and things just went our way as opposed to not going our way, because we all know how that happens and things don't go our way. And this was just, you know, it's just nice to know that, you know, when things go well, that it was recognized, and, you know, guys learned from it. You know, I had people calling me, you know, after the fire saying, wow, like, I never thought of doing it that way and doing this that way and whatever. And, you know, it so easily could have gone the other way, you know, and that's you know, that's just what FDIC is all about. Like, you know, maybe sharing that with other guys, saying, hey, listen, you know, this is what I did at that fire, okay? I pre-planned that because I know those buildings. I've been doing this for 31 years in the same area. And I said, if I ever get a fire in that building, this is what I'm going to do. And maybe pre-planned something in my mind and maybe had orchestrated like a kind of an action plan. And lo and behold, I had a fire just exactly how I envisioned it, and I was able to implement that plan. But I mean, so I shared that with the class yesterday, and a lot of people were like, wow, well, that's a great idea. I never really thought about, doing stuff like that. And that's what this is all about. It's just, if something good happens, we share about it. And conversely, if something bad happens, we share about that as well. I mean, I had an incident about a week or two ago that could have been really bad. We had 6 guys go to the hospital. And it turned out that it was something totally unexpected. And I shared it with the class. It was something that had to do with some people trying to extract gold out of computer parts, and they were working with chemicals in a basement, and somehow some water got onto it went on fire. Some people threw water on it, created a cloud, and, my guys thought it was something else. And it was just one of those things that just happens sometimes in the fire service. And I feel like I shared it with the class, and maybe it'll happen again. And maybe if one guy says, hey, you know what, that chief talked about this, happening in that basement that time. Hey guys, why don't we just hold up for a second? Then I think I've done my job, I mean, that's what it's all about. It happened in New York City, in the Bronx, but who's to say it doesn't happen in Detroit or Boston or, anywhere in Houston or anywhere in the United States or anywhere in the world. I mean, it's something that people are doing now. They're, to make a little extra money, they'll get some hydrochloric acid, some uric acid. They'll take some computer parts, throw them in the bin, and let them sit for a few days and try to extract the gold. And if it goes on fire, you're going to have a hazmat situation. And never would have expected it. But if I was to be, let's say, so proud that I don't want to admit that, maybe we messed up a little bit, or not even if it was a mistake, but if it was something that we just never envisioned, at least by sharing it with the room, and I plan on doing an article about it, that maybe next time it won't happen. Maybe someone will think twice before going into that basement, and maybe not thinking it's an oil burner, maybe thinking like, let's think the worst case scenario. Like this possibility exists. So, the fire service is funny. I think they came out with the closecalls.com a few years ago, and I think that was the best thing that ever happened, because someone told me that the best way to learn is from other people's mistakes. Sometimes we have that hard lesson though, and we have to put our hand on the stove and we make a mistake. But the beauty about coming out to FDIC, I know I do it, and I'm sure other instructors do it, is that we share the good stuff and the bad stuff. And you can take that back to your department, and hopefully we won't have any reoccurrences. All right. So anyway, unfortunately, I had a meeting with the authors where we're going to come out with the next edition of Fire. I guess it's Penwell actually, Fire Engineering's handbook. So we had a conflicting schedule, and I had to go to the instructors, the authors meeting, and I kind of walked out kind of short. But the next guys are here. So anyway, I strongly suggest if you really love the job like I do, this would be the place to be. So I'll see you on the radio.
You started your show first hour, so. Yeah, we just have people on Facebook say what they want to ask, present, where we're going. The ocean.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for listening in. This is Tom Merrill, and I have this installment of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department live from FDIC 2017. And I'm very honored and humbled and excited to have on with me a guest today. And that's Chris Willis, who is he coordinates in the show Small Town Tactics on Fire Engineering Radio. So, Chris, thank you for being here.
Thank you, buddy.
It's awesome to meet up. I know you just rolled into town, and it's been a great week, as I'm sure everyone that's hosted and talked on the radio show this today and yesterday and all week has been saying just what a great week it is. And if this is the only show you're listening to, just to reiterate, FDIC is where it's at. It's just as Chief Lasky says, the Disney World for firefighters. There's something here for everybody, from any department, paid or volunteer, small or large, busy department. It doesn't matter. There's something here for everybody, for everyone to take something back. One little nugget, it makes it worth it. One little nugget that you can take back to your fire department. And this show, along with Chris's, focuses on the volunteer fire service by and large, and some of the issues and challenges that affect the volunteer fire service. And Chris, I guess there's some people out there that are very concerned about the future of the volunteer fire service.
Yeah, so we got asked on our show about doing one, and about where we've been, where we're going, where we're at now. The concerns are generally, what's the history, or where are we even evolving into as a volunteer service? Are we going to have a volunteer service down the road? And so I knew FDIC was coming up, and I knew with your show and my show, we talked about doing something together as a mutual aid thing, if you will. And so I thought, yeah, what a better place to do it than the Mecca of all fire conferences, and something with such great history as FDIC.
And absolutely. And let's hit the mutual aid button, send me a second alarm, and let's get into this topic, because this is definitely a good topic. And I've got pages of notes from the classes I went to this week, and I went to several classes involving leadership, because I think it all comes down to good, solid leadership. But you hit on something there that I think is a start in building a professional foundation, but it's also a start in creating house pride and pride in your department, which in many ways can affect retention.
Right.
And that's history. And I think we need to be proud of where we come from. And I think we need to tell our story, because what I'm finding as I travel around now talking to firefighters from all over, there's a lot of firefighters out there who don't know where their story begins. They don't know who were the movers and shakers. I was at a firehouse once, just within the last 6 months, did a presentation, because one of the presentations I like to do is the history of volunteer departments, and people have me come in and tell their story. And it's a lot of fun. And I'll tell you, the stories I've heard are just absolutely incredible. Well, after the presentation, we're in the club room at the firehouse, and they have a mirror, and there's the name of a firefighter, his date of birth, his date of death. And there's another mirror on the other wall, the name of a firefighter, date of birth, date of death. So as I'm hanging out with the firefighters, I asked a couple of the youngsters, who are those two gentlemen? They couldn't tell me. That's a shame. That's a shame. Why are we taking the time to put mirrors up and names and date of birth, date of death, if we're not telling their story? So I say, tell your department's story. Get those old photos out, dust them off, get them up on the wall. While members are around that know the stories, get them written down, preserve them, identify who's in the photos. And you know what? Every now and then, take your probies, maybe make a part of an orientation program as you're walking down the floor of the firehouse. Point out who these people are. Let your new people know about your great traditions, your great customs, and your great people that help start your department. Tell the story. And the stories can be good, they can be bad, they can be happy, they can be sad, but they need to be told.
Right.
And that's a good foundation for building house pride. Because once we lose those names, once we lose those stories, they're gone forever.
Yeah.
They're gone forever.
And I don't know how it used to be a lot more prevalent in volunteer service where the tradition was sharing it, passing it on, who's who. It was more of a family atmosphere. And the question I often get asked is, where did we go wrong as a servicer? Did we go wrong? Did we change? Is it a culture thing, or is it something that we just got caught up in as far as we got to get the guys on the trucks, get their hours, get them rolling? And so nobody else wants to take the time to do the history of the department. Where do you think we went wrong?
Well, I think it might be life changes. I think over the last 20 years, there's been such a cultural shift and demands placed on our members as just average citizens that the time we do have to put in is often taken up doing the necessary and important training. And in a lot of cases, call volume has increased dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
So those have taken what precious time, what's the greatest gift a volunteer has to give? It's time. And that's taken a lot of their time. So maybe this history has gotten pushed to the back burner. And in some cases, I've noticed that there's some people that just don't think their history is that important. So they just pass over it. And I've heard from many companies, when it gets to be their 75th anniversary, their 100th anniversary, maybe their 50th anniversary, they go to write the history and there's not even anything started. So they have to start from scratch.
Yeah, that's what I said.
And if that's the case for you out there, start now. Sit down, put it together, because you know what? You can always add to it. Get something down. And if you're fortunate to have some of your senior members still around that know the stories about how you started, and any of those happy and sad stories, or good or bad stories, or any of the stories that go into your book, get it written down and then tell it. You know what's a great idea? If you could do a department newsletter, even a quarterly newsletter, put a little story each month in that newsletter, or each quarter in that newsletter, because it's a great way of keeping your history alive.
I think today it's even easier to keep track of your history, starting now with the digital era, social media. And you see a lot of departments switching over from their newsletters, like you said. Now we have Facebook pages. We can get our communities involved. We can get the history from the community. These older people out there can actually get involved with this. And you can get the whole entire town, community, whatever you want to call yourselves. Everybody can get involved in keeping that history going.
Great use of social media.
It is. And, but I mean, it's just like call volume books. And looking back through some of those, I know there's some departments that they kept these books that are, 30, 40 years old. But you can go through there and you can see the calls and who made the calls. And, you just put the pictures with the faces, if you will, and then the names. And it really is a neat thing to do. And you can see, like you said, the history of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that the history is getting, it's something that's getting overlooked a lot now in a lot of places, and I do think that hurts. But the other thing, like he was talking about, is that company pride, and actually taking pride within your department and trying to get that image of what you guys are. I know a lot of guys like to create company logos or create, their T-shirts or something, to instill pride. And there's a lot of that doesn't go on today, and you see it a lot in the larger cities and stuff where they have the individual houses. But I think as a whole, the smaller departments just look at it as, well, there's a truck. I got my, we go to fires and that's it. And it's kind of sad. They don't take the pride in the equipment. They don't take the pride in their identity as a fire service or as a fire department. What are some of the things you've seen as far as that goes? And how are some of the people shaking that up and getting that image of the department out there?
Well, you hit a good point there about that is one of the best uses of social media. You want to create a good image and connect with your community in a positive way. Tell your department story on social media. You can do History Fact of the Month or Throwback Thursday, I think they call it on social media, where you can tell your story. But then to create that positive image, all the good things our volunteers are doing, and it's much more than just going to calls, isn't it? It's training, obviously, and you can put that on there and show the community how your members are out training. It's doing fire prevention details and working with local schools and civic organizations to teach about fire prevention, fire safety. You can get that out there. Heck, there's fire departments that raise money for charities in my area. Some of the departments raise money once a year for the muscular dystrophy, or one of the local hospitals, our children's hospital. They sell newspapers where the dollar newspaper cost gets donated to the hospital. Firefighters are in the forefront doing that in parts of my town. Get that on social media. And so those can help create that good image. But then with our members, if we have something we're proud of, a logo, a tradition, or a custom, it's got to start somewhere. And maybe the pride used to be there and now it's gone. So someone's got to take ownership of that. Usually anybody can take ownership of it, but let's say it's flat and dead in your department. Leaders, if you consider yourself a leader, and if you're an officer, you should be a leader. So it starts with you, company officer, lieutenant, captain, all the way up to chief. You start instilling and exhibiting that pride. And then as new members come in, maybe you sit down with them and as you're reviewing your history and walking around talking about it and showing. So if you have a logo or something, you can tell the story of your logo or everything that logo stands for. Service and sacrifice, dedication, compassion, acting competently. Maybe that's a good start for getting that pride, not just in your department, but your logo as well.
Yeah, and I've seen that within areas around where I'm from, and each house has their own, their animal, if you will. And, you know, one's like an old horse and one's a bulldog. And, you know, and one of the things they learn in the produce school is what that means. Where did that come from? What's the history behind that? And so then they kind of take pride in that station when they get assigned there. They understand, you know, this is why there's a horse head hanging up or a bulldog there, you know, and it's getting involved with that kind of stuff. But like you said, with the social media, I've seen, he was talking to Brandon Fletcher last night.
Yes.
And his department, something that was really unique was they put a kind of a service announcement out there about slow moving vehicles and about be careful of the tractors and stuff because of his area being agricultural based. You know, be careful of the tractors, what to do when you're around a tractor on the road, you know, how to pass them. Because if you look on like fire engineering, you'll see a lot where cars will get stuck underneath these high croppers and things. And then you end up with car fires underneath of them and you know, from hitting lines on the tractors. So there's a lot of times things like that'll happen, and his department has taken that and turned it into like a flyer, you know, what to do around them, how to pass them, you know. Don't just assume that they're going to be turning, you know, learning your hand signals, even if they signal you because they don't have turn signals. And it was unique. It's something I've never seen done before. And it's something like that, you know, if you look at his department's Facebook page and the amount of involvement that he'll get the community out on, you know, with the survey monkeys and things like that, that you can do these public, I guess you could say, surveys to see, you know, what would you like to see done at the firehouse? How satisfied are you with the services that we provide? You know, it's stuff like that goes a long way. And I think especially in the volunteer side, when you're relying on these people for, you know, donations and stuff, that kind of service can go a long way. You may be able to be the best department at putting out their fires, but in the same sense, you got to have that knack of treating the public the way you'd want to be treated almost. And if you go, you know, looking like a horse's ass, if you will, then they're going to remember that come donation time, you know. And so that kind of stuff goes a long way. And I think that we got to get back into it. I think today, at least I've seen, today's generation doesn't seem to be as big a thing as much as going to the fires. They often forget the knack of taking care of the public, what's involved, from the medical calls to the smells and bells and being nice to the, you know, yeah, so they burnt their food on the stove, you know, it happens. And, you know, and things like that. I think we oftentimes get away from it.
Yeah, and you know, you mentioned something there, and I'm looking over some of the notes I took in my classes this week. I have a lot of quotes. I like to take quotes, and everything we're talking about so far can easily be covered by this one quote. One of the classes I was in, volunteer leadership, which was taught by Chris Niebling and Dave Casey. They talked about take ownership if you consider yourself a leader. Or I'm going to say if you consider yourself just a member of your department, if you're a true member of your department, take ownership of everything that happens in that firehouse. And if building pride is one of the things that needs to happen, make it happen by doing the things we just talked about. And take ownership by portraying the well-defined image of the firefighter every day. Live it. Live that example of honest integrity and service, and help build that professional foundation and start getting some pride in your house. There's so much to be proud of in your firehouse. Chances are that most departments started when they're, and some of them still exist, that don't have two nickels to rub together.
Right.
And
Right.
You're starting from scratch. You're coming to this department, running it the best of your ability after working all day, after taking care of what you've been taking care of at home, after coaching, as I say, that little league game, helping kids with homework, whatever it is, it's off to the firehouse to do whatever needs to be done in such an honorable way. Take a step back and remember that.
Right. And, you know, it's a lot of this reminds me of Chief Lasky's and the speeches that he's given. I know you're a big follower of Chief Lasky, and anybody out there should be following the things that he puts out. You know, the pride and ownership, the integrity, where the fire service has been, understanding that history. It's all there for a reason. It doesn't matter if, like you said, you're from a large department that's interstate like New York, or all the way down to like where I'm at, which is rural Kentucky. It's the foundation and the fundamentals that then you build up on. And, you know, when we talk about the training and getting away from your history, you know, one of the things that I often see on our Facebook group is a fear. You know, where are we going? Are we putting too much training on these guys? Are we asking too much of our volunteers, which is why that we're having a hard time getting volunteers in? There's all these different questions that come up, and, you know, I don't know if having too much training is really even an option. Is it not, you know, a problem? Is it a problem?
Well, you know, I like to say, I think in training is one of the most important, I call it the cornerstone of the professional foundation. And if that cornerstone training isn't being done correctly and being taken seriously, the cornerstone starts cracking and the whole foundation can fall. And let's face it, folks, we're training for something that can kill you.
Yeah.
You are training for a job that can kill you. And even if you are as well trained as you can be, things still happen in this job that can kill you. Who else does that? Who else signs up to volunteer for something that could kill you? Now, I've had people say, well, the U.S. military. Absolutely. God bless them for their service. That's their paid job, though. I'm talking volunteer. Who else signs up for something that can kill you? And training is so important. Let's remember the old saying that fires do not treat volunteers any different than fires treat paid. And Mr. or Mrs. Smith, when their house is on fire, what do they say? 911. And what do they say when they answer the phone? Send the fire department. Do they say send the volunteer fire department?
Right.
Or send the paid? No, it's send the fire department. And we have a duty and an obligation and a responsibility to be as well prepared and well trained as we can be.
Right. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned with the military. What's one of the things that they always do? They're always
Training.
Right. And
let me, real quick, I just heard something. I just heard this, and I'm going to get it wrong probably, but I read, I'm a big military buff, big history buff, and I swear I heard, I think it was Jocko, the famous Navy SEAL. I love his podcast on leadership. And I believe he said up until the Gulf War, the first Gulf War from the early 1990s, 1991, I believe, the United States military really hadn't been in a tank battle since the Korean War, which I was shocked. I thought maybe there had been some in Vietnam, but he said no. The U.S. military, by and large, hadn't been in a tank battle since the Korean War. And when the Persian Gulf War happened in 1991, there were several tank battles that our U.S. military excelled in and did damn well. Why?
Training.
Train. Train.
Yeah, because you can tell that those guys operating tanks in '91 weren't around in Korea. So,
Absolutely not.
but they took the lessons that have been
And they
passed
took
down.
the lessons learned.
Yeah.
Somebody was teaching and mentoring that was in Korea and said, hey, I'm moving on. It's time for you to get it now.
Yep, and they passed it all down, and that's how, and they adapted and adopted new ways from Korea all the way to, the first Persian Gulf War. And, and that's the stuff that I think, you see at conferences like FDIC where these guys that Danny was just talking about sharing his lessons on some of the fires he's been on. And if you don't take that kind of stuff, how are you going to ever learn from it?
You have to train. There's one thing I was shocked at, and I've talked to volunteers all over the conference this week. So many great firefighters, which that's what you would expect here at FDIC. But several of them were concerned and upset at the lack of training in their hometown departments. And it blew me away because I come from a strong training culture. I didn't realize this was such a problem, but
it is.
Let's shape up out there, folks. We have got to train and teach our people that it's important to train regularly.
Yeah, and it's, you see it all the time where guys are more refreshed to come here and be around like-minded individuals because they don't feel like they have that back home. Guys would rather just go and show up and then take a nap all day long and not do anything. And at the end of the day, they feel like the only way that they're ever going to be around like-minded people and learn things is to be at conferences like FDIC. Mind you, you're going to be exposed to a lot more. But when you feel like the only time you can really get quality training is at places like FDIC, there's a problem, like you said, internally. Now that being said, case, you come to something like this, one of the things that we often hear is, well, how do you even implement it? Because you're learning from guys that are, FDNY, Detroit, Boston, large metro cities. But, it's like you said, well, fire doesn't differentiate between a paid or a volunteer, large city or small. It's, if you're in rural Kentucky, you're not going to have a tenement building the way that Danny will have. But in the same sense, you're going to have farmhouses that still burn. And, the way that you're going to address them may be a little bit different. But the science of fire is still the science of fire, no matter where you go.
Another quote from FDIC 2017. This is from the great Billy Goldfeather. The more we do things wrong, the more it seems right. And that applies to training. If your firehouse isn't training, if your members aren't fired up for training, if there's a careless attitude about it, right, then eventually, especially for newer members, because what are they doing? They're watching those who are already members. So it seems right. Now, can we use that as an excuse for hurting our department's membership or recruitment and retention? It shouldn't be. You should be fired up to train. Heck, you sign that dotted line to be a firefighter or even a scene support member, because maybe not everyone joining is a frontline firefighter. I get that. There's some good programs out there, but you're still signing up. So you've got to make that commitment to be as good, well prepared as possible, to be a team player and understand that we need to train. Heck, I use the analogy in my class all the time. My favorite baseball player, I got to go back, he's retired now, is Derek Jeter. But let's use last year's World Series Cub shortstop, Addison Russell from the Chicago Cubs. What are they, a baseball player who grew up playing Little League, played through high school, played through college, then gets drafted, maybe plays in the minor leagues for a bunch of years before getting into the major leagues. Now he's a major league player, 5, 10 years. Heck, they won the World Series. What do they still do every single game and even in between games? They practice fielding balls. Do you think he learned or she learned how to do that in the minor leagues and high school and in the Little League back home?
Some talking day one.
But you practice and practice and practice, and soon practice becomes the norm. We can't use that as an excuse that we're losing members because the training requirements are too hard. Be creative. Make the training worth it and fun for them to show up. Make it flexible where you're trying to have meet people's schedules today. But maybe look at, instead of that being the problem, maybe we're the problem by not being flexible and adaptable enough. fire service has changed a lot. Have you changed with the fire service? That's what I like to say.
You know, one of the things is, you know, if you want to think about it like that as far as recruiting goes, if we're recruiting people based on the image that you just have to show up and make fire calls, maybe we're recruiting the wrong people because of the image that we portray, and then the people that we're recruiting are those kind of people that we really don't be needing.
Oh, right.
So it's, you know, it's one of those things. If you want to call in, where's it?
I was going to say that. I'm glad you thought of it. Please feel free.
Feel free to call us at 1-760-454-8852. We'll be glad to talk to you about anything like this or any of the other things you want to talk about, really. Your show, your conference. So, you know, feel free to call in. I guess Scott over here will get you squared away and he'll get us on. And, you know, but getting back to where we were with this, you know, I often see, and I know you've seen it on fire engineering, where these departments are shutting down because they say the training requirements are too high. You know, and I think some of them have even been in New York. So what's your take on departments shutting down based on that? Is there more internal issues going on than, and the easy thing to do is to blame the training?
Yeah, I think that they're looking for a crutch to have an easy explanation for why the fire department shut down or combined or went out of business. I think the bottom line is they're running out of members. So what's the root cause of that? And how do we fix that? And there's that's the great $1 million question. Recruitment is one animal, retention is another. We'll talk about recruitment first. How do we recruit the members? Well, first of all, I think we need to be out with the public, engage the public. I think signs out at street corners are fine, but I find a lot of times the best recruitment tool is you or I talking to Mr. or Mrs. Public saying, hey, did you know we're volunteer? Did you know we need members? Talking to neighbors, talking to friends, and also then making sure that we're portraying a good, clean, professional image. So people maybe think to themselves, hey, I'd like to be part of that organization, because if we're not portraying a clean image, people are reluctant to join.
Right.
And I think that's part of it. And then when people are inquiring about it, have answers ready for them. A lot of people point to their website. Okay, is it updated? Is it clean? Is it fresh?
That's it.
Have a booklet that you can hand somebody, that simple word booklet, easy to do, explaining your rules, explaining what you're all about, telling a little bit of your proud history. Talk about the fun you have, about it's a second family. You can even talk about, we've had success stories with members joining our department and other departments that came from broken homes or didn't have solid support at home, and they got that at the firehouse. Yep. Go into the schools and talk to your kids about it. I always said, and I did this, when my local elementary school had a career day, I went in and talked about being a volunteer firefighter, because you can make a career out of it. I've made a career out of being a volunteer firefighter. Yes. And so we've got to, I know there's a lot of good, and you know what, the National Volunteer Fire Council has some great resources for recruitment now. Social media is a great tool to use, and they'll give you some free tools to use. Go on the National Volunteer Fire Council's website, register your department. They have a great registry for registering all departments, and they will give you so many great resources that you can use to help try and recruit members. But retention.
Yep.
Make it a fun firehouse. I just had an article come out in Firehouse this month, which thank you to Penwell and Fire Engineering and all the great people there. I'm honored that my article made it in the April edition of Fire Engineering. But you know, my guys and gals at my firehouse, they tease me all the time, but it's one of my sayings. Make it a firehouse. We call it a fire hall in our area a lot. To me, that's very social. Fire station is very formal. I say firehouse. Create a warm environment, a welcoming environment.
Yes.
Where people are comfortable being at. And let them have fun. I know of firehouses out there where they frown on their people hanging out there. Put a ping pong table in, put a pool table in, horseshoe pits out in the back. Have a movie night. Let them have fun at the firehouse.
I agree.
And the other thing is with firehouses, it's 2017. We need to know the limits of good organizational behavior. Bullying is completely unacceptable. Hazing is completely unacceptable. It's a diversified fire service today. We welcome all races and ethnicities, men, women. We can mold everybody into a good, solid firefighter.
Right.
Probie chores are fine. Probie expectations, there's kitchen duties, things like that. No problem at all. But we don't bully. We don't haze. Some of the stories over the last year or two, sodomizing recruits, other crazy thing. What are we doing as a fire service? That goes against absolutely everything we stand for. I think that could certainly have a little retention issue.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not going to get many people when you're sodomizing your new people. So they're not going to want to join up. So, you know, and it's things like that that'll give, you know, a black eye to the service in whole. And people are going to say, you know, so that's what you guys are about. I mean, you know, and a lot of people, a prime example is, you know, when you look at law enforcement, people, you know, you see all these cases on the news, and they automatically assume that all police officers are bad people. And, you know, if you're not careful in the fire service, it's those kind of incidents that can give the fire service those kind of images, you know, and people are going to start questioning, what are you all really doing when you're at the fire station or the firehouse? And, you know, and again, when people think these things, how are you going to recruit? Or even in the case, how are you going to retain them if they do come on and they see a lot of this stuff going on, like you said? You know, having fun and poking fun at one another is something that's been done since, you know.
Oh, please, if I had $1 for every short joke, I'd be a millionaire.
Right, right. So, yeah, but at the same time, there's a limit, and some people can take things that other people can't. And, you know, and when you're in a volunteer station, you know, it's really, really finicky because, you know, those people are the lifeblood, you know, and you know, a lot of guys fail to understand it. You know, it's hard enough to get guys and girls to volunteer to do this stuff, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go and start running them off, filling those shoes isn't always necessarily the easiest thing to do.
Absolutely.
So it's a double-edged sword there. Tradition plus retaining people. So.
And if you can have all the greatest equipment in the world, but what good is it if you know people on the rigs get them out? You know. And
right.
Here's another quote from this week that perfectly sums up our responsibilities, and that's: if you don't tell somebody they did something wrong, don't be surprised when they do it again. So everyone has a responsibility to, and we need to create that culture in our firehouses that bullying, harassment is not tolerated.
Right.
But if it's seen or witnessed, we need to stop it and tell whoever's doing it, hey, that's wrong. We don't stand for that in this department. And whoever does that needs to know they're going to have the support from the higher ups if
right.
it does happen.
Right. Yeah, and that's, you know, I'm looking at your notes here with all the quotes and you know, things that you picked up from these classes. You know, it's things like that. You know, you can come for a class on training, but then you can pick up one little tidbit that's applicable to retention. You can pick up things that you can apply to how to recruit people. There's so much wealth in what people say and do, and, you know, just listening to guys that you're talking about. And, you know, and if you truly don't stand up, you're no better than the guy who's doing the bullying himself.
Right.
And
you want people at your firehouse.
You do.
You want families at your firehouse. Welcome the families into the firehouse. Now, have a movie night, have a game night. Some companies like to go out and meet the new family when a new member joins or is interested in joining, so they get that warm family feeling right off the bat. I think that's a great idea.
It is.
So,
it is, and it's something that I know that used to happen a lot more. And you know, like we talked about, you know, things are starting to go downhill. And I do think that a lot of times firehouses are becoming more like fire halls. It is becoming a social thing. It is becoming more a boys' club, if you will. And we're getting away from what we're there to really be doing, and we're turning it into the Elks Club.
Yeah, and anytime those tones could go off, and it could be the call. So
Right.
Here's another one for you. I could do all these quotes all week.
Oh.
What you accept in your presence becomes your standard. So again, if this stuff is happening in your presence and you don't do anything to fix it, and that can apply to on the training ground or inside the firehouse walls or even outside with the way people are behaving. Soon it becomes your standard. Soon it becomes your department standard, and people see that, and they think your whole department then is that way or doing that. So make it a firehouse, a place people want to be, a place our members can be comfortable being at, a place that doesn't tolerate bullying, doesn't tolerate hazing, and a place we embrace family. And the other major recruitment and retention issue, especially another retention issue really, is good leadership.
It is.
You know what happens, Chris? Tell me if you agree with this. So many times we elect or appoint officers, and in some cases it's because they have the time to hold the office. You know what, I'm retired, or you know what, I'm a college kid, I'm not married yet, I don't have a full-time job. Oh, he's a good guy or a good girl because they're around a lot, so we'll make them the truck lieutenant.
Yep.
Or she's on the board of directors for one of the local businesses. Great, we'll make her our vice president. Or he's just a great guy, we'll make him our treasurer. But guess what? Does that mean they know how to do the job? We need to prepare them and give them the tools necessary to do the job. And first and foremost, obviously leadership skills are important. People skills. I want everyone to get a pen, get a piece of paper, write this down. If you don't remember anything else from this show today, you want to be a good leader, start with this, okay? You can take this to the bank. Be nice. Be nice.
That's all it is.
Realize that not everybody thinks the way you think. Realize that you're not always going to have, everybody wants that A team. Everybody wants those 5 officers, those 3 officers. In my department, there's 14 firematic officers. Everybody wants all of them to be on the same page every minute of every day. It's not going to happen. So what I say is, this is the hand you're dealt. You can't do anything about it. It's how you play the cards. That's what's going to make your organization prosper and move forward. So learn how to work with people. How do you do that? Read, educate yourself. The department has a responsibility to help you by sending you to conferences like this. Maybe they can afford to buy you Fire Engineering Magazine, but there's websites out there. Got to develop officers that can understand human behavior and learn to mold their team. And you know what? Understand that you might not always get your way. You might not always get your way. It is a diverse, it's a different world today. And we need to mold officers and leaders. We just had some visitor walk in. That's okay. Hello, goodbye.
Yeah. He was lost, I think. But yeah, but no, it's interesting you say that. We talk about you was mentioning things like the officers getting voted in, and sometimes you'll see guys who they've got the certifications, they've got the college credits, and the things that everybody wants to see, and you look at their resume, and it's like, man, this is like perfect. And then they get in, and then they can't do the job. They're either super arrogant. They don't want to learn. They don't want to nurture people's growth. And that's a lot of like what you were saying. They're not nice. They're just not good people for it.
Right.
But they've got those certifications, and then you end up with a monster in office, and then you start watching your numbers start dwindling.
Can we teach them? Can we teach them how to be
better? If they're teachable, and that's the other thing.
So personal accountability is huge.
There you go.
You need to look in the mirror. I read a quote once. This isn't in my notes. I just think I know this one. If you're not happy with how your organization is performing, look in the mirror.
Yep.
Look in the mirror, people.
And I think Paul Combs has got stuff on that too.
Yeah, the great Paul Combs. What a great cartoonist he is. I use a bunch of his cartoons in my presentation because they're spot on. They're spot on. Ditch the ego, people. Ditch the ego. What does Chief Lasky say? Egos eats brains.
Yep.
Be humble. Be humble. Look in the mirror and say, what can I do? But you have a responsibility to yourself to make yourself a better officer, a better leader. as well as a responsibility to leading your department. So, and then volunteers, again, might be harder than, paid departments can take people when they get appointed to lieutenant or captain or chief, and they can send them away for formal training. Maybe not so possible in the volunteer ranks.
Right.
Here's a tidbit for anybody out there. Get a book off Amazon. 5-Alarm Leadership, Step Up and Lead, First In, Last Out. There's so many great books out there. And they don't all have to be fire books. It's Your Ship. Check that one out. The great Mayor Rudy Giuliani had a great book on leadership. There's so many out there. You know what I tell my younger people that are going to college, and maybe it's not always younger people, it might be middle-aged people going to college still. I told my own kids this. You're probably going to have to take some electives in college, if at all possible. Take some electives on leadership. Because even if, in my kids' case, none of them followed me into the volunteer fire service, those are lessons you're going to take the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Learn how to work with people. Ditch the ego. Look in the mirror and be honest with yourself. What can I do better? You might be the greatest firefighter in the world. You might be the one we're looking to bring that hose line in on every fire, or drive the rig, or cut the person out of the car, or you're the best EMS provider in the world. So you get into that position of being an officer, but now you have no idea how to deal with people. You're going to fail. You have a responsibility to yourself as well.
Yeah, and I think, like you were saying with failing, it's like Danny was saying earlier about, you make mistakes. The point is to learn from them and not keep repeating them. And, like you were saying with Billy Goldfitter's quote, when you're doing the wrong things and you're not checking it, it's going to become the norm. And if you've got that ego that says that what you're doing is right and everybody else is wrong, you're just going to build on that.
Right.
The best leaders in the world will tell you, yeah, I've made a lot of mistakes. And it's interesting because I was talking to one of the guys who was, he's higher up on the food chain, if you will, at Louisville. And, and he was talking about one time about a couple of houses he lost when he was a brand new officer, in command. And, made the wrong mistake, called for the wrong thing, and, 2 vacants, I think it was, burned down. But at the end of the day, it never happened again. He did that, and he learned from it.
Yeah.
And he moved on. And, and that's the thing. You got to have that mindset of, I'm going to make mistakes, but I got to learn from them. But then in the same sense, you got to have peers that you can go to, and it's always nice to be able to say, what are you thinking? Your senior man in your fire station, it's critical. It may be the old guy who's been there for 30, 40 years, but at the same time, some may say, well, he's not an officer. No, but he's a senior man.
That can be like an officer.
He can do the officer's job. And in some cases,
respected, but he should be respected, absolutely. A senior firefighter in any station should be.
It is, and I think it's something that we're getting away from. I think we're looking at it now as far as who's the smartest, is more than, who's got the time, who's got the knowledge, who's got the people skills. It's very interesting the way that we're adopting things, and it's, you may look at these guys and you think, well, they're the quiet ones. Sometimes the quiet ones are quiet for a reason.
Yeah, one of my favorite, I could talk leadership all day, and one of my favorite leadership, and this is I might have some of the numbers and figures wrong, but what I like to point out is, so you're the chief, huh? That's a tough job, or you're the president, or you're the commissioner of your volunteer department. Congratulations. Don't complain that the department's not moving in the direction you want it to because of your people. Because you know what? The world was saved in World War II in many ways by the actions of one general who led the greatest invasion in history and watched those troops race across Europe and free Europe. Europe was saved, and to a great extent the world was saved through the actions and decisions and abilities of General Eisenhower. Now, on one hand, he had to deal with Patton, tenacious, hard to get along with. On the other hand, he had Montgomery, egotistical, according to some, did whatever he wanted to do. He was always fighting with the command. And on the other hand, he had a general named Omar Bradley, was, I believe the nickname for him was the gentleman's general. Everyone loved him, and they were all great leaders. And Eisenhower knew how to play that hand. And look at that success.
Yep.
So you think it's hard running a volunteer fire department? You're not saving the world. You're saving your community. But it's still equally as important. So that's my little analogy on it. I don't know. You guys all laughing at yourself for that. It's Bobby Haltonish. Come on, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, Bobby's always given history quotes and about the Navy SEALs and stuff like that. So yeah, you're quoting Eisenhower. So
well, I don't know how much time we got, but and the other thing with retention is make the most of your members' time.
Mm-hmm.
We said earlier that time is the most important thing a volunteer gives, right? And by the way, again, this is Fire Engineering, Blog Talk Radio, and Tom Merrill here from the Professional Volunteer Fire Department with Chris Willis from Small Town Tactics. If anybody would like to call in before we head off, it's 760-454-8852, talking about issues in the future of the volunteer fire service. And we've hit on a few things: training, recruitment, retention, building pride through knowing and understanding your history. But the other thing that sometimes drives volunteers away is not using their time adequately. And it can be showing up on a drill night to see a drill is not prepared, a bunch of people running around trying to figure out what to do.
Yep.
They might have scheduled a babysitter. They might have made arrangements, given up game tickets, whatever, to go to the firehouse, and now they see the time's being completely wasted. They may show up at the firehouse and just go home and say to their spouse or significant other, what a complete waste of time that was.
Yeah, and that's the truth. And it's like you said with babysitters, time is of the essence for them. And, when these people are putting up good money for stuff like that, or they're taking time away from their kids' little league games and whatever, they want to see that what they're doing is worthwhile and going towards something that's going to mean something. And when all they're doing is sitting around unprepared for training, and they're waiting 20 minutes while you try and get the computer to work, or, and sometimes things happen, but, when you're just coming in there and reading them word for word off of a PowerPoint, they could take and sit down and read that PowerPoint to themselves and learn the same thing that you just taught them, and so it's that preparedness, and when we talk about drill, and I know that, we've kind of moved past that, but just like you said, with taking the time and being prepared, utilization of time is huge in training. Is it a drill that's going to be worthwhile for them, or is it going to be something that's going to be, a waste of their time? And it goes a long way.
And let's face it, we need to have meetings. We need to meet with each other and plan and have committees and things like that. But in this day and age, is there more we can do to make the most out of members' time via maybe email? Maybe we can create email groups for that committee or that board, and ideas can be generated back and forth among emails. And then what I'd like to do, and again, this is just one idea I had to try and save on time. If I knew I was going to be at the firehouse for, say, our department, we have a department monthly, you have a monthly meeting once a month. So every first Monday of every month is our department monthly meeting. I'm going to be at the firehouse anyway at 8 o'clock for the meeting start. If there was another committee I had to meet with, or maybe it was somebody, if I was doing a drill that I had to meet with about the drill, how about if we do it that same night, half hour earlier or a half hour after the meeting ends, or for a half hour after the meeting? So now I'm getting 2 things done in 1 week, and I don't have to go up there another day that week for that extra meeting.
Utilize every time.
Yep. Utilize members' times, make the most of your members' time, and understand that some people don't have as much time as others. Does the firefighter who's working full-time and whose spouse is working full-time and maybe coaches Little League or leads a scout troop or something like that have as much time to give as one of our younger members who's maybe in college or working part-time, unmarried yet, still living home with mom and dad? Probably not. But are they due respect? And do we belittle them for having not as high of a percentage? Understand there's still rules, responsibilities, maybe minimum call responses. But we need to understand people have different limits of time that they can give. So in addition to making the most of it, be respectful of them and what they're doing, and understand that there's different factors in their life.
Yeah, and I mean, it goes without saying, be nice to people.
Yeah.
Like you was just saying, you know, just because they're not able to go there, be as you know, aggressive as the guy who's not married, single, you know, lives at home, doesn't mean that they don't have worth and value. You know, and in the same sense that he was talking about with all the different jobs, you know, you may have a retired, you know, say school bus driver. You know, he may be great at getting your trucks out. May not be good at going into fires because he's got bad legs or something. But at the same time, he can get your trucks out, he can get them there, he can engineer. You know, again, it's a needed position.
Whole other take on recruitment there too is maybe, and again, it's happening a lot. You don't have to be a frontline firefighter to be in the volunteer fire department. Yeah, we need them, we want them, but we also need drivers, steam support personnel, outside personnel. Maybe there's a white collar worker. That you always have to be a white collar worker to be a treasurer, but I'm just saying as an example. Maybe there's someone from your local bank or local business that can give some time to help be your department treasurer, or maybe do some party planning for you for some of your activities.
Right.
Maybe you have to do fund drives, picnics, or field days, and that takes a lot of time from your busy volunteers. Maybe there's other support groups out there, the local scouting troops that can help do things like that and set up pavilions or clean up the next day.
Right.
And get community service hours for it. A lot of creative ideas out there.
Yeah, it's just thinking outside the box and utilizing what you have, and you know, get people involved, get your department involved. You know, what ideas do you have? You know, you're talking about committees. You know, again, this is stuff that I think a lot of times it used to not be as prevalent as far as 10 minutes. Yeah,
15.
10 to 15. So, yeah, I think, you know, in the past it was one of those things where the community was more involved. Now it seems that, you know, with the way that the hustle and bustle of the world, you got to get involved. You know, and to do that, everybody's got a different act. If you just focus it on yourself and what do I think we can do, you know, you may miss something. If you include the committees, get these committees going within your department, put all these projects together, and you may hit, you know, between everybody there, you may end up finding a home run. So.
Right. You know, that's something we probably went from all different levels. We went from being very community involved, especially years ago, where everyone seemed to know somebody in the volunteer fire service, or entire families were in there, which in some cases families are obviously still in there, generations upon generations of families. But time was the community recognized the volunteer fire department was a very cost-effective way of providing this important service. And shop owners would close up their shops when the alarm bell rang.
Right.
And it was allowable for other people to leave work for calls. And everyone seemed to work close to town. It's just different today. I think we need to do we need to re-engage and energize that engaging with the community and show the community what we do and how important it is and how we're out in the community, but also how we need their support.
Right. That's interesting. You mentioned how it used to be everybody worked close by and could make these daytime runs. I think anybody you talk to now in a volunteer department, the worst part of the day for them to have any kind of an incident is right in the daytime while everybody else is at work. Because, you know, getting those people that are, you know, going to be even much harder because people commute farther for work. They don't work in town now. And if they do, a lot of shops aren't wanting to close down. They're not wanting to let their people go to these calls. And, you know, it creates a whole other issue as far as recruiting goes, getting people that can make those runs in the daytime. So, you know, that's where if you got somebody who can make a run in the daytime, you go doing something that's going to run them off. You're not only going to be hindering your numbers, but you're basically putting people in the daytime at risk. You know, so it's a big juggling act is really what this boils down to. And so, you know, I mean, with that, where do you think we're going to end up going? Let's look at FDIC and the Volunteer Fire Service.
Now, there are some predicting the demise of the Volunteer Fire Service, but I joined my volunteer department in 1982, and I remember some of the senior members at the time saying, in 10 years, we'll be all paid, or in 20 years, we'll be all paid. Well, here it is 35 years later. We're still going strong, albeit with some hiccups in the way. Will there be some realignments and adjustments? Absolutely. Are we going to see more paid on call? I think so. But I still think for the immediate future, volunteers there's 788,000 volunteer firefighters and some 20,000 volunteer fire departments in the U.S. That's a lot. They're not going to go away overnight. Do we want it to survive? I think we do. And I think we can work hard to make them survive by embracing our history, but also understanding we need to progress and move forward by treating our people with respect, by making the most of their time, by connecting with the community and getting their support, by showcasing all the good attributes of firefighters, decent behavior, good, clean image portrayal. It can't go away overnight. No, it's not going to go away overnight.
No.
And mergers are the answer for a lot of people. And I'm just Tom Merrill from the Buffalo, New York area. How does merger help if company A merges with company B and they each had 20 members? Okay, now you got 40. But if your territory was 20 square miles each, now you're covering 40 square miles as one department. How does it work? I don't know. I don't know how that would solve issues. You still got to go to the calls.
True. And I think, and being on departments that have done that, puts new faces in there. I think in the same sense, it can help with your budgets. If your department is struggling with budgeting, it can help with that. It can help with your grants. It can help with, getting guys out in the daytime. But I think as a whole, it's one of those things that, as far as, like you said, getting people there in a fast and efficient manner, it may not help with that. What's going to help is recruiting, getting your funds up to where you can maybe put in some more stations. And if you put those stations in, again, we fall back to recruiting and retention to staff those stations. There's a lot of different things that can come up, but I think when you do start looking at mergers, the things that you got to do is remember that everybody's got their identity. These stations have their identities.
Very proud of those.
And they're very proud of them. And like you were saying earlier, these towns and these communities, when they're merging, they don't want to lose that. It's been around for 80 plus years, maybe, if not longer.
Bring up an interesting story. In my younger days, I worked at a supermarket, a local supermarket, as I was going to college. It was called Top Supermarket. We were independently owned by a family who owned it for generations. Mm-hmm. And our store number was 29, and we used to call ourselves the Fighting 29 on our softball team. Well, around 1985, the family retired, and the Top Supermarket was taken over by the big chain. And one of the first things they did was change our store number. We flipped out. We wrote all over, I probably get is the statute of limitations over? We wrote all over the Fighting 29, everywhere, on beams, on the wall, by the time clock. Time clock used to have to punch in at these jobs, stamp your time that you came in. But we write the Fighting 29th. We were at the Fighting 29th will never die. We were so proud. I could imagine it would be even more so with the volunteer fire department that's merging with another. Got to come up with a way to maintain their proud traditions and customs and logos as well if you are going to merge. So maybe mergers are an answer to help as well. But I don't think the answer is to do away with training.
No.
I think when people, I think we have to be honest with people. Yes, you're going to have to train. Yes, you're going to have to get a firefighter 1 certification that takes this many hours, but we will work with you to make it work.
That's the key. Take ownership in your people. Mm-hmm. We want people to take ownership within the department and take responsibility for getting their training in. But sometimes a lot of places don't take ownership of their people.
Right.
And they look at them as just, they're there. They don't look at them as a resource. And at the end of the day, the volunteer is the ultimate resource within that department. Can you take a 1950s truck and go put out fire? Sure. But if you ain't got somebody to get on that truck and go,
right?
What good are you? It's the fire department. So the people and the time is the most ultimate thing that you can have there with it. And, you know, and I think it's just utilizing what you've got. I think it's, you know, when we look at FDIC, I know with your show and my show, the past 5 years has been a huge change. You know, fire engineering has taken charge, and, you know, they're addressing the stuff with the volunteers in small towns. And you're starting to see a lot more classes, I think, coming out with the that are being presented by guys who are from volunteer departments. You know, you're starting to see more rural-based classes. You're starting to see these things, and it's kind of a shift in what you're used to seeing. But I think it's, you know, it's fire engineering is seeing the change. They're seeing the need there, and, you know, I think it's going to get even better. I think that the future of the volunteer service is not going away. I think it's going to get better. But I think with that, I think the culture is going to change. It's going to become that professional service. It's not going to be the good old boys club. We have to change that mindset, and we have to become a professional mindset. And we have to do things as a professional, just without a paycheck.
I'll tell you one thing that shouldn't change at all, and that's the pride you should have in being a firefighter. Everyone out there, you should be proud, darn proud, to be a firefighter and in the great volunteer fire service. And you should be equally, if not more proud, to be in your hometown volunteer department. And you should just exhibit that pride, talk up that pride at every opportunity you get, and display all the good behaviors and attributes of a proud volunteer firefighter.
It's not just wearing a t-shirt out to everything you do. You know, it's showing people in these small towns realize that you're on the department. It's your actions that are going to speak volume.
Absolutely.
And that's what's going to set the tone for how your department looks in the community. But so I know we've got a little bit of time, but you know, I want to say, Tom, it's been great having you.
Yeah, it's been a great dual show. I love it. We could talk forever about this. And but people out there, please reach out to us. I'm on Facebook. I have the Professional Volunteer Fire Department Facebook page. I have my own personal Facebook page, Tom Merrill. I have no problem with you reaching out to me on that. Email me. It's tamerrill63@aol.com. Send me information, anything I can help with. Chris, I'm sure you're easy to get a hold of.
Yeah, Chris Willis on Facebook, and you know, we're on Small Town Tactics and Tools group, and you know, you can feel free to email me at cwillisff@gmail.com. So you know, and like that's any of these instructors, these guys will reach out and talk to you. So you know, we're in a world where technology and media is right there at your fingertips. You just got to reach out, and people will give it to you. They'll help you. So,
yeah. And this is the greatest show in the world. It really is. If you've never had a chance to get to FDIC, try and make it in your plans for next year.
Indeed.
The level of training, the networking, the camaraderie, the brother and sisterhood, it's second to none. The great professional staff at Penwell.
Yeah, we got Scott over here.
I mean, they're just amazing people to work and deal with, and Ginger and all her help, and just it's an amazing experience. I'm going home fired up again, and I know the firefighters from my department that are here are going home fired up again, and we're going to do our best to keep that fire and passion alive in my area. And I'm going to try and keep it alive, talking to you all on the Fire Engineering Blog Talk Radio.
Yep, and if you're here, you know, definitely, like you said, take this stuff back. That's what every one of these guys will tell you. Every instructor and Chief Hulk will tell you. You got to take it back. It ain't going to do nobody any good if you don't take it back and share it. And but with that, like you said, Tom, you know, it's been great having you, and you know, it's been a good show doing this. Mutual aid, if you will. So.
And as we close, the bagpipes are all playing out there. I can hear them. It's just, it sends chills, a shiver down my spine. People, be proud to be firefighters. Be damn proud to be firefighters. Be professional at all times. Thank you to Fire Engineering, and we'll see you on my shows next week. When are you back on?
I think in May.
Okay, well, then May's next week. Here we go.
Yep, here we go.
All right, thanks, everybody.